joining me live if you're able. And we're going to finish off the video we've been discussing that Sam Shamoun did in response to Bart Ehrman. But he blew it, okay? And he blew it during the time when I was looking for reasons to expose him. So we're always looking to expose Sam because, he's a bad person. We've tried many times, as those of you who've been here for any, reasonable period know, to work with him on some level. It's never easy when you have opposing beliefs, even in the same basic realm of belief, right? The Bible, Christianity. But we know it's not that simple. Of course, I've known Sam a long time, so it was never really going to be that simple. But we actually did try a few times in different ways to kind of work with Sam here. I went on his live in good faith after he was attacking me, so I was just there to show up and represent and talk about what he wanted, and he went insane. He lies about things in ways where when we try to stop talking about him, he continues to slander me and people who are like me in my group, right? So it's never really a fair deal with Sam. We just pick moments where we think we can do our best job to expose him. He's a high-profile guy. A lot of people listen to Sam and have learned a lot from Sam, even if it's absolutely ridiculous, as we've seen and as you're going to see tonight. And so, in fact, it's so interesting, isn't it? When you look around today, there are a lot of people who are basically saying the same things Sam has said. And Sam himself says things that Trinitarians have been saying in similar ways for a long time. We give him some credit, though. Sam is unique in his overall disposition as an arguer and effective liar, right? And I mean that. So we give him credit there. He's also not stupid in terms of experiential knowledge. He has a lot of that. And the people who are like him and who he's cultivated also have had a lot of experience. So they're similar to him and they just utilize the same arguments and never learn. Sometimes they'll adjust, they'll adapt, but never really address the issue, at least not with me and many other people I know. You'll see that on display tonight. Now, as you know, in particular, the prior show, we've talked about Philippians 2 and a lot of things to this point. We're finishing off this video we've been discussing, though. A lot of things Sam says in the remaining parts we're going to be showing and responding to, we've already talked about. One of those is Philippians 2. Now, I'm going to go through what he says. But I'm going to, as you're going to see, just if he says the same things we've already addressed in the prior part 7, I'm just going to see part 7. Maybe I'll say some things again, but I'm going to try to move more efficiently through it is what I'm saying. This is also the case with, he also brings up the whole name of God thing tonight, which is important. But again, this has been brought up several times, either with respect to ego eimi as the divine name, or the divine name being given to Jesus from Bart Ehrman's perspective versus Sam, right? But it comes up again tonight. So, and there is something I'm going to show you. I'm going to give you a proof text. I've already given you one of them, but together with this one, for many Trinitarians, there's no way out. And there really is no way out anyway. It relates to Isaiah 43:7. And of course, we already know how that relates to Philippians 2 and how everybody, all, right, especially in the Greek, it says both. Whereas the Hebrew just says kol, right? All, just all, right? All called by my name, God's name, for his glory and are created. Right? I'm kind of paraphrasing the repetitions, which we'll get to specifically. But those essential features are expressly stated in that text. All called, form of kara, by my, God's name. He's created, made for his glory. Exactly like we see when Paul applies Isaiah 45. We've talked about this in prior parts, but I'm summarizing. In Philippians 2, totally changes it, right? Discussed it previously. We gave 4 reasons, right? Number 1, the God of Isaiah is not created, right? He doesn't get created. He doesn't die and get resurrected, right? He's not made into a higher position, which is what Philippians 2 says. Sam lied explicitly about that. He doesn't understand. This is one of the things we've seen, of course, just quickly, that Sam has many blatant bad deficiencies. As crafty as he is and experienced, he also is really sometimes dumb. He literally misquoted Bart Ehrman and said it was Bart Ehrman's words and reinforced that it was his words when it weren't. They weren't. They were Sam's. Ha ha! It was pretty wild, as you know, and that was just one of them, right? Guys cited Bart Ehrman several times in this video, one video of his, several of ours, and lied and misrepresented that Bart Ehrman has stated Philippians was written in the early 40s, right? Never once said it. So he's insane. We already know this, but it's been pretty bad. Of course, he also doesn't understand that every single thing applicable to Jesus, including I was getting to in Philippians 2, the divine name being given to him, right? So he's resurrected. He's elevated to a higher position. He's given the divine name. That's 3. And what's 4? For God the Father's glory. Not God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit's glory. Not for Jesus' glory. For God the Father's glory. What is everything done in Isaiah 45 to? To whose glory? That's what they always tell us, right? Who is it in Isaiah 45? Well, it's Yahweh. We already know that, right? Yeah. That's why when Paul quotes parts of it and changes it in 4, right? Obviously different ways that are all, as part of the 4, still to the God of Isaiah 45's glory. Exactly what is your problem? Well, their problem is their later doctrine, right? They can't see clearly, everybody. On some of them, we have to have some mercy. They may not agree with us, but you and I can see, right? They can't see. They may think the same of us. That's not our problem, though. We're not them. I think some are just blind. Like John 12. Like Isaiah 53. Like Isaiah 6:10. Now, it couldn't be more obvious, right? So again, there's something else. It's their later doctrine. Without that, everything I just said is what you would be seeing and teaching. That's the Bible. Now, they love to bring up Jeremiah 33:16. This is not new. I've been exposing them my whole life almost, right? Well, since I've been doing this quite a while. And we're going to do it again tonight, okay? In fact, it's so easy to do and they miss it every time. It's unfortunate that they're tomato canning to infinity, isn't it? And so we get this false appraisal of people in ways where they're literally talking to people. Not only should they not be talking, they're talking to people they shouldn't be talking to because they don't know what they're talking about. And here we are, right? Marveling at retards. Let me tell you something. If you see Albie Al in any group or crew, it's already lights out, okay? Dude literally relies on the Aramaic Bible in plain English just because it says, the text says it, things it doesn't say in Aramaic, English, or in any other language of the New Testament. Albie Al's gone on all levels. These guys are the lowest level, okay? It's like beyond anything you can imagine. They're literally Sam clones that are dumber than him, okay? They only have some of the replicated experience and insanity. That's it. And then they kind of merge in with some of these ortho fags who don't know the Bible at all. Textually, they're going to get blown out on every level. You bring up the Hebrew Bible with their text, gone, divine name, gone, right? Basically, if they get outside their energies, powers, and their view of God, gone, which nothing in the Bible supports, so they're not even going to be able to start. So it's failure to launch for them, right? They only have their paganism from later people that we can trace all the way back to Ignatius and the New Testament. So now what, boys, right? Where's your history? We have one. We know what yours is too. So if you start lying about it, we'll talk about that too. Let's get back to Sam, right? Let's blow him out. We're going to blow him out. Sam, it's time to get blown out, right? So we're going to blow out Sam. We're going to finish him off. He brings up all this stuff. We're going to we'll recap it as we go through it, but he's so gone. He just repeats a lot of the stuff, as you'll see. Again, he talks about this in the other series we have going, where we've done part 1, where they kind of did a partial response. We blew him out, but his faces were so wild, we just couldn't get through it all, kind of like this one. We're going to get back to that, but again, that too also has Philippians 2, right? A lot of these exact same stuff. No, not everything. So we are going to get back to it. We're going to finish off this video tonight. And then tomorrow, we're going to do another type of video. I put a post in the on the channel forum. So we're going to talk about part 3 of my Inmedio article that I uploaded to the Elihu Book site. Just go to Inmedio tab. Still doing a lot of work there. It's just not that easy. These older articles and stuff, you might think, well, why don't you just upload them? Well, because I want to at least go through them. If there are any errors, I don't want to just put up the error again, right? If I made a mistake on a word or something, well, I'll correct that and note it. But also, again, as I mentioned in the corrective references at the end, dated, some of the paragraphs were longer than I write now, and sentences. So overall, though, the content is exactly the same, format's the same, and they're very simple. They are not like my more technical stuff, even JWD level. Maybe a chapter or two, because a lot of that was actually formative to some of that stuff. But they're definitely more readable, I believe, and shareable. Like if you're looking for something to study with people, well, I think one thing would be the Bible, of course. But if you're looking for something to like help you focus a lot of text on a subject about, the People of God, Inmedio, 3 articles that I uploaded are a good place to start. They're simple enough and they cover enough things that relate to people who want to try to answer some important questions. How do we determine what's true? How do we identify the people of God? We'll be talking about that a lot on Sunday. We've talked about the 7 leavens, right? So how do you identify the enemies of God's people? Scribes, Pharisees, people like them, Sadducees, modern day equivalents, right? Not hard to see. Very easy to see. Either way, we talked about that one already. So we're going to talk about part 3, Sons of the Kingdom, tomorrow, okay? Maybe around 6 o'clock my time. Maybe 5. I'll try to give people on the west coast of the U.S. a little time before they have to hit it, go to sleep for Monday. So between 5 and 6 tomorrow. Then we'll take a few days off. Probably later in the week, we'll go back. Maybe I'll do a couple uploads of videos that are not so specific to Sam, so we can, again, break it up a little bit more. Not that I really care. I mean, people should know by now I talk about a lot of different stuff. Yes, we talk about a lot of Trinity because that's a lot of my background. A lot of people come at me about it, and that's just part of our subject material. So, and Sam is our main focus on the anti-Trinitarian side in large part. So there's only really a couple ways to deal with him effectively, and I think I have it right. Not everyone agrees. That's just the way it goes. You're not me, and he's not coming after you. So if he's coming after you, you do you, I'll do me, okay? Either way, I see my approach as the only way, right? Any other way is just going to position him to take more advantage of you, blaspheme God. Either way, we try to take him seriously, so at least you guys have material, right? You can talk to people, his minions. And remember, God logic too. Now, I don't know like Albial either very well. I just know him over the years as someone Sam has cultivated into this really whacked out kook who, while he may have normal qualities to other people in his own ways, religiously, he's a kook, okay? And I won't get into it anymore. I already mentioned the Aramaic Bible. That should be enough to tell anybody, you rely on Albial, you're stupid. Now, God logic is not very old, right? He's very young. He's been in Sam's clutches. Whoever did that erred. If he did that, he erred. If he just said, hey, I want to be with this fatso, well then, isn't that great? Wasn't that a great decision in hindsight? Literally everything you learned from him, God logic, you could have learned just by reading me. Of course, you probably would have become more like me before you became like him, which is why he got to you before me. Either way. Now that you're more like him and you also think like Nick, who thinks like the orthos, but who thinks he's the shit, but doesn't know the Bible, right? And contradicts it, and who literally is, I'll just let it go, okay? You haven't had the best people, I'll say that, God Logic. You seem like a pretty decent guy, though. And you're feeling the full betrayal now, for sure. You still don't understand what it means for Jesus to be God. You seem to prefer calling him God than God's son. When you find out those are the same thing and that that's not the Father, let me know, okay? Otherwise, let's get back to Sam. Haha, yes, his uncle. Although I don't want to disparage God Logic at this point with Sam. Sam is, God Logic did pour everything, what I saw, because I gave him a 10. Like I talked about before we start. Welcome, everyone. Part 8, we're going to finish tonight. Haha. Yeah, I saw God Logic being used by Sam and literally repeating some of the worst stuff I've ever heard, right? And it's just like so terrible to see. Oh well. Anything for the Trinity, right, boys? Anyway, so I took interest in him there. But, Sam's really, once I saw he was doing that, I realized, well, why waste time with God? I'm not looking to just, obviously, I'm not a grifter, right? I'm not looking to go after people who just have numbers. I want the ones who have, who's the biggest threat? That's my question. Nothing else really matters, right? If Sam is the one actually making all these people, how do you not see that? Anyway, I know he's pretty good at hiding. Oh, one of the best. And yet he's right there, right? So, we give him credit. Hey, Life Here and Beyond, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. We always appreciate any gestures. I don't do this for money, but I recognize money as a way of expressing appreciation that is highly valued because I know you work for it. As do I. Just not Sam. Well, he lies, but so to the extent you consider that work, I don't think it's that much work, but we'll give him credit, right, for sticking with the lie, Sam, whatever credit that's worth, right? I don't think it's worth any. You got it. Yes, thank you again, Life Here and Beyond. I do appreciate you will I think get your money's worth tonight, no question about it. I got some good stuff for you. Oh yeah. No, and I got even more coming. We're going to do the whole, the thing I did with Isaiah that showed the speakers and the changes in narrative patterns. And, it's so game over, right? It's just a catastrophe. You just wait till you see what I did in Revelation. It's coming. New blog article. Oh, yeah. No, it's game over for everybody here on that level who's gone, doesn't understand. A big part of the problem, everybody, and this, again, we understand Trinitarians, you guys aren't all the same. We don't mean to put you up. We're speaking for the people we deal with a lot. We don't mean to lump in everyone else who may be a decent person, still believe in the Trinity, and be willing to talk about it normally, like Kelly. And he's doing sodomy now. So we're making a lot of progress on that front, on the normal level. Although I don't know how normal that is. I think it is, but I think Kelly's still working on it. But there's potential for good discussion with people in that vein. Sam, though, is going to be an ongoing problem. And unfortunately, even if we have good, he will interfere. That's what he does. Jude, yeah, you need a reminder? Trinitarians, non-Trinitarians, you all need a reminder? Okay, it's right there, the letter of Jude. Read it again. You'll understand how serious this is and why I take it so seriously. I could just, and I do, refer to my videos to limit what I do. But I am concerned. I want to help my people, the ones who are with me in praising Jah, right? And we recognize we're just regular people who try to do the right things. We make mistakes. We accept that we sin, like Paul, and fight with our flesh, but we don't quit. We will never quit because we're alive. We've been made alive, and even though we fall, we get up every time. That's what the Bible says about the righteous one. Wicked one, when they go down, it's game over, okay? Now, we got to deal with the wicked one. He's not an easy foe, and he has people like Sam who make life for us a little difficult. So we deal with this stuff this way so people have a record to see, hey, no, we already dealt with that guy, okay? And he blew all this stuff. Now, a lot of these parts, these are the 8 parts. We're going to finish this tonight, this video. A lot of them aren't labeled sufficiently with all the different verses we've done in each part. I'm going to label as many as I can, but there's not a lot of room and to get the title and the right labels and in the title and stuff. I'll put what I can on the different parts, but I'm also going to be doing clips of the parts that relate to texts we discuss. So in that way, we'll build a catalog of the texts that we discussed, even if you can't like pull it up in the parts. Sam and his parts, right? Sam and his inches. Or he's actually taking a step down, right? What we go down to centimeters, right, Sam? Millimeters? It's not looking good, I'll tell you that, right? Dumpster fire, right? Okay. We're going to bring up Sam and bring him up. Let's go back to the video where we left off with him acting extremely perverted, right? He was being perverted with his misquotations and his abuse of Bart Ehrman. Now, we don't agree. We're not like Bart Ehrman supporters. We're not like attacking. I've done a blog article where I am, I think, professionally critical of Bart Ehrman and Dan Wallace and disagreeing over John 1:18. And I've cited Bart Ehrman a couple times, but nothing like extensively or in a overly reliant or critical way. But he's a well-known New Testament scholar, text critical scholar. He's not really known as a theologian or someone who discusses theology and understands the New Testament or even the Old and the theology of the later writers after the New Testament and how they differ or are the same and what they relate to, or even contemporaries. And again, I think on some level he does and would have to, based on some of the things he says and writes, that Sam shows but doesn't get right. And just shows he doesn't really know what's happening. Now, again, Bart Ehrman may not understand everything, but he knows more than Sam, I'm willing to say, based on what Sam is showing us, which we're going to bring up again right now. Okay. Let me bring him up. Okay.
Man, he's hot.
There he is. Look at him. First, let me say hi to everybody. I know I said hi to Life Here and Beyond. Thank you again, Life Here and Beyond. Good to see you. NZ Brandon, thank you, and good to see you. I appreciate you being a regular supporter as well, taking the time. Thank you. Petsy, yes, it's good to see you too. And Bankhead is also a regular supporter of the channel. So thank you, Bankhead. Goes back a long time. That's right, Betsy. It's very obvious who that is. And Betsy, there's a name, someone's being given someone else's name in Philippians 2. And if you see that name as the divine name, which according to Isaiah 43:7, God calls people by for his glory that he creates, which is literally related to in the glorification sense that goes to the Father, to Isaiah 45 and Philippians 2. Right, so it's not a question of having his name. It's a question of whether you are him, right? If you're being given his name ever, you are not him. So the question is, why would someone who's not him, Yahweh, be given his name, right? That's the only question we need to answer. Because normally, if someone's given someone else's name, you're not that person. There's a reason for why they're giving it to you. Now, maybe you'll say, like Trinitarians do, well, it's because he's equal to him and is a person of a triune God. Okay, well, then you have to show that. You have to show that that's what that indicates. So we all accept the Bible as an authority, and we need you to show that being called by his name for his glory means that he's equal to him as part of a triune God. Because I'm going to show you that's not what it means, like expressly based on what I just said, being called by his name for his glory involves, right? So, and that it proves Jesus is created. Using a text they misuse and try to prove he's Yahweh, right? When it literally says the very thing that proves he's not. called. Exact same term used in Isaiah 43:7. It's game over, everybody. Kara, by the way, is the term. And so we're going to get to both of those. NZ Brandon, good to see you. Ken Anderson, good to see you. Bra 999U does chat like Sam Shamoun here. I don't know what he's saying. Whatever, but you're welcome. Nice to have you, I guess. Nightlight Z. You'll find out. Betsy answered you. Nice job. True and glue. Very nice. Okay, I just don't want to miss anybody. I may miss some, but we're going to get started. Let's bring up Sam. Right? He's here. Here he is, everybody. Look, let's bring up Sam. He's about to get totally blown out, and we're going to finish him off tonight in this video. Yes, so we can see that Sam is here. Now, this is where we left off. Right, we're at hour 3 minute 4, in around the 40s in the seconds. It's a 4 hour 10 minute 54 second video. Again, we've talked about a lot of stuff he's going to bring up. Okay, this is his David Wood Wants My Channel. You can see it up there at the top left. David Wood Wants My Channel deleted. Bart Ehrman proves the Trinity. Right, so well, the first part may be true, but the second part is totally false. Right. Bart Ehrman definitely doesn't prove the Trinity, and he definitely doesn't agree with Sam, and Sam definitely misinterprets him, misquotes him, and gets it all wrong. So let's hear him do that again, because I have no doubt that's what's going to happen.
Helping you destroy Stafford, Joe's Witnesses, Unitarians, and Muslims. As an historian, saying these are historical facts that can be demonstrated. He told you that historically, the Jewish followers of Jesus, whom the Muslims say were Muslims, worship Jesus as God in status, position, glory, and authority.
Okay, and so as we saw in the prior video, Sam often acts like he's quoting Bart Ehrman, but he isn't, right? If you want, we've seen this several times throughout this whole series. But last video, part 7, like near the first third, I would say. It's probably I'm going to do a separate clip. It's probably the worst I've ever seen, because he not only doubles down, he triples down. Like he says it before and then after, his words, not mine, right? And before he says, listen to what he says. It's so amazing. If you go back and watch that in part 7, right? So, you need to be really careful what he's saying. If you don't see it like word for word, and we're also assuming that what we're reading is literally, like, he puts a source down there at the bottom. You can see references, a source he quotes previously in this video, and the pages. And then he cites what's his, or whoever's helping him with ours. The bold stuff, bold in capital. Again, though, right, when he allegedly is reading it, and I'm not kidding. If you go back to part 7, he literally starts reading it. Then he stops and he says, listen to what he says, or something like that. Totally does not read him, acts like he does, misquotes him, and then says, those are his words, not mine. Right? I'm telling you guys, it was just so unbelievable. He has no shame. Sam's a unique character, because people listen to him, even though he's retarded, right? He does have experience, though, mostly because of me and blowing him out. But right here, right? So we're going to let him say things, but it may not at all be what Bart's really saying or said. Like what he said it, we'll play it again, where he said, Bart says he's equal to God. Bart does say that, basically, but he's not using that as an equation to being equal with Yahweh. And I explain in parts 1 and in part 6, I believe it was, in particular, how contemporary understandings of differentiation between the name nameless God and his two chief powers, God and Lord, in this Middle Platonic understanding that's not biblical, but related to people who believe both Plato and the Bible, like Philo, provide an example of how he's wrong. And he doesn't really nuance Bart Ehrman's view or understand it in any critical way with that in mind. He just goes off the deep end with Trinity, right? We'll hear that last part again just so we're fresh with what he's talking about.
Followers of Jesus, whom the Muslims say were Muslims, worship Jesus as God in status, position, glory, and authority, and then began to believe he was already existing as a divine person before he became man.
He gives various views, Sam, and you know this because we read it, but you ignored qualifying terms he made. Again, see the prior parts, right? It's all from the same video, though. My prior parts, because it's so out of control, we have to spend all this time dealing with this guy. I literally spent over 10 hours, before that 8.5, and before that over 8, just responding to other videos of this guy. And I'm like, well, there's no point in just doing a full straight video. Let's just break it up because he's insane, you know. And that's why you literally could stop him almost every 5 seconds and find a flaw or a problem. It's really crazy. But anyway, the things he's saying are Bart Ehrman's view here are not the way he's saying it. Or if they are, like he says Jesus is equal to God, it's not what he thinks it means. See prior parts.
You awake? You up? You understand how much Bart Ehrman...
Sam, if we weren't awake, your screeching could literally wake the dead. And I'm not giving you like advice on how you might pray and get the dead to talk back to you when you do that. No, just don't do that and pray to the one who's living to you, namely God and through Jesus. Although you'll be punished because you're blasphemy. But there's no point in interrupting the dead, okay? They're living to God, trying to praise him, unlike you.
is helping you destroy Islam and the cults?
Well, your misrepresentation, misquotation, and misuse of Bart Ehrman will more than likely, especially if they watch my videos, and especially if they watch the last video where you misquoted him so badly, it was incredible, attributed to him 2 times before and after, words that are not his but yours. Yeah, no, I think it's going to go bad for you.
See that? But wait, you thought that was bad. Let me see how long we got. Oh, finally. Okay, that's good. Here, pages 277, 278.
And if you think finally means he's almost done, no, think again. But this is that we are going to finish this tonight. Oh, yeah, no, definitely. So in that sense, yes.
One other point needs to be reemphasized at this stage, however. If one uses the term high Christology to talk about this kind of a conventional view,
okay, and I believe again he's quoting Bart Ehrman, like he said earlier. The bold and capitals are his, but we're accepting that on its face. Okay, so if you happen to note he's doing this incorrectly, he's definitely verbally quoting it incorrectly at times, like we've been talking about. But otherwise, we're giving him the benefit of the doubt if he reads it correctly, which again he has shown he cannot do consistently.
prologue of John would be presenting a very high Christology indeed, higher than that even the Philippians poem. We'll get to that. For the author of that poem, as for Paul himself,
Okay, so I just want to note again, look at the top. I'll remove me real quick. Look at the very top line and just read with me for a few seconds so you see what I'm talking about. It says one other point needs to be reemphasized at this stage, however. If one uses the term high Christology to talk about this kind of incarnational view, the prologue of John would be presenting a very high Christology, would be higher than that even in the Philippians poem. This is also what he, see, remember, Sam sees like us, it consistent in the New Testament, but not Bart Ehrman, right? So again, he's not able to really finesse this properly, but moving past that, for the author of that poem, as for Paul himself, Christ was some kind of angelic being before becoming a human. Probably the chief angel or angel of the Lord. Now, we've talked about this in prior parts, and I have all kinds of videos about this, right? My 10-hour video was in large part about the angel of the Lord, right? So all you have to do is do a search of my channel to find out what's really going on in the Bible. I even have a less than 10-minute unanswerables question video based on texts in the New Testament that prove the angel of Yahweh in the Old Testament is Michael, but definitely created just like Michael. And they also say the same words when only Michael is said to be with the Israelites during the same time the angel of the Lord is appointed there leading with them at the time when Moses dies. And Michael's said to be there, according to Jude, arguing with Satan. Well, the angel of the Lord's the one who's there, right? Literally meets up with Joshua. And so they don't understand the Bible. They have a whole different view and connection. This uncreated angel that's not taught in the Bible. It's outside of the Bible. They redefine everything. They redefine angel. They redefine God. They redefine firstborn. They redefine son. Redefine only begotten. They redefine kanao, right? They redefine equal many times, right? So all you have to do is see prior parts without the Trinitarians using the words of the Bible, but changing their meaning, usually without telling you and using it in more than one sense, hence equivocating, right? Oh, Fearless Fag does this all the time, and he tries to hide it all the time, and you can't hide it from me because I see it all the time. It's the only thing they can do. Literally using the terms like God in ways the Bible never uses them. And they'd have to argue to prove that's how they're used. They're just assuming that's how they're used and then arguing with you, trying to use his logic, right? What a clown ass, dude. I can't believe you guys aren't smoking this dude harder. A couple people did already, but you guys should be just clobbering this kook, right? Literally is constantly feeding himself through his earphones and looking down and searching and looking up stuff while he's talking to you, right? It's a full clown show. Why are you guys letting this dork have even 2 seconds in this capacity? So stupid. I'd get on to other people too, but he's related to Sam directly in his patheticness. So I'll leave it at that. Now, let's get back to the ultimate pig face, right? And blimp. Let's let him lie some more.
Than that, even the Philippians poem. We'll get to that. For the author of that poem, as for Paul himself, Christ was some kind of angelic being before becoming a human, probably the chief angel and angel of the Lord. And as a result of his obedience to God unto death, he was given an even more exalted state of being as
given a more exalted state of being, which would mean what, Sam? He didn't have this eternally. So Sam is not emphasizing all kinds of stuff, including the whole chief angel thing. Yeah, he claims he'll talk about it later, and he's just going to say the same thing he said earlier, that angel is a person of the Trinity, hence assuming his view, hence begging the question, hence a circular argument, hence he's stupid.
One who's equal to God in honor and status as the Lord of all.
It says he was given an even more exalted state of being as one equal to God. Given that, Sam. So it's not eternal, it's temporal. In other words, for Bart, he's being given something he didn't have before, which is true. So unlike you, he's following the Bible here. That's all.
Okay? That's Philippians.
Which you don't agree with and or lie about.
This in itself is a remarkably exalted view of Yahweh.
He's reading right up there where he highlighted. Let's follow him and listen.
Ruler, preacher, Galilean Jew, Now you gotta wonder and ask Bart, what led Jews to worship a fellow Jew whom they knew and saw killed and buried? What would lead these Jews to worship a Jew that they knew as Yahweh?
Because they knew, unlike you, that he was given Yahweh's name, created for his glory. Everyone knew this. Everyone knew Isaiah in particular, right? And yet you don't. You're the only person, along with all the people you've trained to be liars or stupid like you, who doesn't understand that Yahweh calls people by his name for his glory, and he creates them. Everything you say doesn't happen, happens in the Bible, right? And even Bart Ehrman sees that a creature is given Yahweh's name. So, Sam, no one gives Yahweh his name. Do you understand that? No one has ever or will ever give God his name. Right. Because it's his name and he doesn't need anyone to give it to him. But guess what? He calls people by his name, whom he creates for his glory. Everyone, right? The Hebrew and the Greek say all. Does all mean all? Okay, so in Colossians 1, all means all. Firstborn, he's created, called by his name for his glory. All means all. He's created, and everyone made in and through him is what it's talking about. Just like when it talks about Eve, by the way, and parallels it with God and Jesus in 1 Corinthians 8 and 1 Corinthians 11. Yeah, it's not saying Eve wasn't created, because we all know she was, and it's not saying Jesus wasn't created, because we all know he was. That's why it says firstborn. That's why it says Eve was taken out of the man. Right. That's why when you don't go beyond what's written, you don't look stupid like you do. Right here.
If there's no resurrection, dude.
Oh, yeah. Well, when they see him resurrected because the Father raised him from the dead, according to Galatians 1:1, is he the Father, Sam? No, I didn't think so. So when he was made alive in the Spirit, like 1 Corinthians 15:45 says, and then raised his body on the third day, like he said he would, John 2:19 through 21, yeah, there's nothing wrong with bowing down before him, just like there wasn't anything wrong with Jacob bowing down before Esau multiple times, and there wasn't anything wrong with the people bowing down before David, before Solomon, and or for Christians to bow down before the Jews of the synagogue of Satan, because the Lord commands it. Right. It's for his glory. Hey, Sam, did you read in Philippians 2 that it says all knees bow to Jesus after he's given the name of you-know-who? Therefore not you-know-who eternally? Even Bart saw that. Right. It says all knees bow to him, to the glory of God the Father. You want a reason why they would all bow to him? To the glory of God the Father. Why do you bow to him? For your own glory and for the glory of a fake God, brought to you by a pagan emperor who wasn't even baptized by someone who believed like you do.
Yeah, he doesn't have an answer.
Of course not, right? We're the only people stupid and you know it all. Unbelievable, huh?
How can he without ending up becoming a Christian again?
Well, I mean, with you lying about what he writes and what he says, he could probably do it pretty easy by not listening to you.
Right? How can he?
He's such a catastrophe, right? All these, how can he, right? What do you mean, how can he? People can do all kinds. We don't need this stupid, like, pondering, right? It's almost like the way Fearless Fag and some of these orthos, especially the orthos, they seem to be, well, Fearless Fag is the worst at incredulity, right? The dude literally is an incredulity machine, right? What? Huh? No, man, what? Right? Like every single thing, the dude is showing these prosodic and paralinguistic features to try to condition his audience in ways that have really nothing to do with the actual heart of the issue. He's just overreacting so that he can buttress his patheticness, right? You guys have to put this kook in his place. Why do you keep letting him act like that, like a kook? Why do you keep letting him get away with all this checking things and earphones? I mean, all this stuff is by design. Okay, all this incredulity. Sam's the worst, right? This guy's the worst. Like I've been saying, these questions, how can he? Well, why don't you just ask a normal question and deal with the evidence instead of offering these pondering questions that are just not related to the issue at hand? Or again, with Nick and these others, what? Oh, what? You believe what? Why don't you just deal with it instead of expressing incredulity to confuse people before you've even said anything? That just indicates that you think what they said is stupid without you showing it yet. It's a form of begging the question when they do that. If I see Nick the fag or any of these other kooks and you're anywhere near me acting like that, that's what I'm going to tell you. You're begging the question by acting that way, fag. Why don't you act normal and keep yourself together for 2 seconds and pull those headphones out of your ass, right? Keep your eyes on me, bitch. Stop looking down.
If there was no resurrection.
You see how wrongly they conclude things based on things the Bible teaches in ways that don't teach the accompanying things they say would have to mean, right? Talk about non sequitur, right? Does not follow, Sam.
Which he believes never took place. Again, guys, this is...
You don't have to be God to be resurrected. God the Father raised him from the dead. Hence, you can be God's son by being the firstborn from the dead, which is literally how he's described. Okay?
why I say the resurrection of Christ is a nightmare for atheism. Why? Because they have to explain away the birth of the church. Because
Sam, it's not as hard to do as you seem to think it is. And I agree with you. There are things about the history of Christianity but that are unique. And the way that you think they're unique is actually the way they're unique in the worst way, because it's the Dragon Church way, which is also something that proves that it's true. But to expect an atheist to just believe all this stuff, right, without, having the Spirit and being, born again in some way that would allow them to understand these things in a deeper sense, especially than you. Again, this is just more kind of fake incredulity designed to condition your audience because your arguments are pathetic.
the earliest documented proclamation is that the Jewish followers of Jesus who knew him were proclaiming God raised him physically, he's alive physically, and start worshiping him as God.
Well, people can start to honor others, like in fact, long before that, right? Semiramis, right? You should know this. The Assyrian woman who literally was worshipped by the Assyrians as a dove because of all the incredible things that people like Diodorus talked about her doing, and if true, are pretty incredible. So again, Sam, this whole idea that people wouldn't develop an either real infatuation if Semiramis, for example, was someone who did all those things and they started worshiping her as a dove, or imagined, it's not hard at all to see that people would begin to believe things that they thought they really happened, and people also were telling them they were true, like you, because people believe what other people tell them. The question is, what evidence do we have? Now, for the resurrection, you have the eyewitness testimony, and I believe it is important, but it's really not something we can cite, right? Because we weren't there, we didn't see it. So we have to look a little bit beyond that. And it's harder to prove the resurrection, Sam, than it is that the Messiah was foretold and came. That's what you should be focusing on. That's what my channel shows, and what I'm going to talk about in another writing I'm working on, the pre-Christian evidence, Sam, that shows us evidence datable to before Jesus was born, or in a secondary sense, but also important, the text we have, for example, of some Psalms that aren't datable before Jesus, but that those who don't believe in Jesus, like the Jews, agree as part of their Masoretic text tradition, did precede Jesus, are still citable, in a secondary sense at least, as evidence he was foretold. Proclaiming that, proving he came and did the things he was foretold to do, I think is the most important thing. Then after that, I think it's much easier for people to believe he was resurrected rather than starting with the weaker position like you do. Just a thought, Sam.
How do you explain that phenomenon?
See, you're overdoing it again, this incredulity. And they literally, just don't agree. Okay. It's not a question of how do you explain the phenomena of the church? Well, again, how do you explain the phenomenon of Semiramis? Well, because they believe that when she disappeared, and she was in her 60s and just disappeared, that she turned into a dove. So they started worshiping a dove. So did they know she turned into a dove, Sam? Did they see her do that? No, they still believed it though, and they did so in a way that probably even to this day some believe and worship the dove. So defeating you, even as a Christian pretending to be an atheist, is easy. As is defeating you as a Christian knowing you're not a Christian and more like an atheist.
Unheard of, unprecedented, right?
Gee, I wonder where all this other fake incredulity has come from. Sam, you're like the monarchia of the pagans, right? All the bad things flow from Sam, and all these pagans are like his powers, right? And he's just using them to like affect us without having to come into contact with us. That's why we seek him out, right? We come right to the blubber.
Among Jews. You with me there? Now watch how bad it gets. This in itself is a remarkably exalted view of Jesus, the ruler preacher from Galilee who proclaimed the coming kingdom of God and who, having ended up on the wrong side of the law, was crucified. But the prologue of John has an even more elevated view of Christ. No, I'll refute that in a minute. Here, Christ is not an angel of God. That's not true. Because even John hints at Jesus being that angel of the Lord who appeared as God to the patriarchs.
Which we agreed to as well, but again, it's like it's appeared. When he says appeared as God, he means as the second person of a Trinity. He means an uncreated angel, an angel that's never talked about in the Bible. That's what he's talking about. In the Bible, all angels are creations. So they're spirit messengers or human messengers, and they're all created. They're all called by God's name unless they're specifically appointed like Michael or Gabriel for purposes that are designatable by name, so that it's not that they don't have their own name. It's just when they represent him. One of the best, if not the best examples is in the book of Zechariah, where in chapter 1, there are two angels. They're both angels of Yahweh. They both are bringing information from Yahweh and speaking as Yahweh. The main one that they think is this one, right? That Bart Ehrman's talking about right here, or that he mentioned. Literally prays to God, asks him questions. God gives him information in response that he then gives to Zechariah. So it proves they're wrong. These idiots just keep running around citing examples where there are rhetorical questions by people asking what they already know. That's not what happens in Zechariah, right? So again, you're following the blind, leading the blind, and all of you are going to fall into a pit if you do that.
Who was later hyper exalted or given a higher place than he had before he appeared on earth. Quite the contrary, even before he appeared, he was the locus of God himself, a being who was God, the one through whom the entire universe was created.
A being. So remember, for Bart Ehrman, again, this is where I believe it's something either similar to, or he may be thinking directly about, the kind of middle Platonic view that we see in people like Philo. Whereas I've talked about in prior parts, see parts 6 and 1 in particular, that there's this view by certain Jews who didn't follow the Bible, well, not entirely, but they used the Bible and used Platonism that isn't what we read in the Bible, and reinterpret it in a lot of different ways that have nothing to do with the Bible, right? And so these different powers exist in the mind of God, a la Plato, these eternal forms. And the being of God actually never moves, but his mind is able to, through these powers, engage the physical world and create things. So Bart Ehrman right here directly refers to a being who was God. In this middle Platonic view, which I read from and showed in Philo in part 6, God and Lord are two powers. It gets confusing, even in their own writings, because they say God on one hand in reference to the beyond all God, whom people like Philo refer to as Ha'on, the being. But that's because, and they don't see that as a name, proper name, because there is no proper name in Middle Platonism. Either Philo or later Christian Middle Platonists, these fathers that they all rely on, that get a lot of things right but a lot of things wrong, like Philo, and also don't use God's name the way they're supposed to, even when they show they know it, like Justin Martyr or Origen. Although Origen uses it in his biblical text, which they later totally destroyed, okay, and condemned him as a heretic. So this is their history. Sam really doesn't understand any of this, but he talks about it as if he does. In any case, what Bart Ehrman writes right here, if these are his words, he's not getting correctly. He's misunderstanding it, misinterpreting it, and misrepresenting it. The parts where he says the Logos of God himself was God, he's not connecting that with a being. Okay, it doesn't say person, Sam. Okay, right there, you know he's not talking Trinity. A Trinitarian would not say that. A being, right? A being in normal usage is the same as a person in that it's your self, your consciousness, who you are, and your body, your nature. That's your body. That's your nature. So just like 1 Corinthians 15 teaches explicitly, right? You couldn't get any clearer. They miss it anyway. In either case, God and Lord are the two powers in this Middle Platonic view that he's not understanding and likely misapplying right here.
He doesn't tell you that in the Jewish sources, both before and during time of John, the Logos was identified with the angel of the Lord. Did you know that? The Word of God, the Logos in Greek, Davar in Hebrew, Mamra in Aramaic, was already identified as the angel of the Lord.
Okay, now he's referring to Jewish sources contemporary with John here, which would have to include Philo, which he has shown no awareness of in terms of even basic understanding. At times he has cited and talked about Philo, but he never does it correctly. And he's not doing it here, right? Let's see if he says anything else.
Do you know who identified it with the angel of the Lord? You know what Jew who wasn't a Christian that was writing at the time Christ and Paul walked the earth? And he's from Alexandria, Egypt, who taught the word. He was writing in Greek, so he called them Logos. Was the angel of the Lord, the chief angel, the high priest, and called him a second God? Philo of Alexandria.
Okay. And of course, I knew he was going to say that. That's why I said, listen to if he's going to say any more. So now he's not going to get this correct. And he's not getting it correct even right now. Because for Philo, the angel of Yahweh is one of his chief powers, the Logos. The Logos is so time exists in Philo both in the incorruptible and the corruptible worlds, right? So in the physical and non-physical. It's not measured the same, right? So for Philo, like in the Bible, time is, and Philo even cites these texts from the Bible in Genesis where it talks about the markers of the heavens for time as a measurement in the physical universe. But he also talks about things that happen in the non-physical realm, the realm of forms and ideas, where God has an idea, for example. Now, I've talked about this before. I have a whole video on it. I read the whole text. We talked about it. There are many others, right? So he talks about the Logos as his eldest creation, right? His eldest, I think the word is creation, but I have to look at the specific text. I'm just going off memory. But he calls him a number of things, but he referred to him as his eldest creation in the sense of the non-physical, time-based or measured realm where things do happen sequentially, okay? So there is order, there is priority, there is eternality, and then there's something that happens. God has an idea. He creates an archetype or a plan, that's the Logos, that then is used by him through his powers to effect what he wants to do in the physical world. None of this is what Sam's going to talk about.
How then can Bart Ehrman tell you that John did not view Christ as a divine angel when John would know to call Jesus the Word, the Logos, would have meant to the Jews that he is the angel of the Lord, because Philo the Jew, writing in Greek to Greeks, using Platonic philosophy to show them the beauty and truth of the Old Testament.
Okay, so you just heard him right there admit, because at this point he can't even deny it, right? Let's listen to that again. So we just heard Sam Shamoun admit that he's relying on sources like Philo, a Middle Platonist Jew, who has totally different views than the Bible on many levels, right? Sam is literally embracing and endorsing his Platonism as a basis for interpreting the Bible. And that's because without it, his view has no hope of being interpreted by the Bible. Now, Sam doesn't really interpret it the way Middle Platonists do, not always. And I don't even think he understands it when he says it the kind of technically right way. Anyway, like right here, the way he's talking about Philo isn't really, I'm not hearing it correctly. I'm hearing him really bend it towards a Trinitarian understanding. Like almost like, again, he's keeping it in angel of the Lord terms, but he's not nuancing it at all in terms of the, Philo even calls the Logos his firstborn, God's firstborn, his first creation. Like I said, his eldest. He uses that term. And I'll cite the specific text in another video when we get to other parts of his second video on this subject. I just didn't get into Philo a lot on this one in terms of, like, I have a whole list of where he refers to different things that happen in the non-physical realm, including events related to the creation or coming forth of the Logos, him as the firstborn, the eldest creation. And again, by that is not meant to indicate a physical time-based creation. It's still a creation. It's still something that happens sequentially in the mind of God. So it doesn't matter. You can look at it in or outside of time because time is there in terms of sequence. If you want to say outside of time because it's not physical, fine. It's still one thing happening after another. And so therefore it's not eternal in the same way. Are they both outside of physical time? Yeah. No one has ever said that's not the case. There's still time there. I have a whole video on it. So if you want to question it, good luck to you. Both in Philo and in the Bible, by the way. So this is just a later pagan view that things don't like happen. They even blow like when Jesus talks about in John 5. We've talked about it. I have a lot of videos on it. And he says, the Son only does what he sees the Father doing. They don't believe that. Literally, Sam denied that. Like he has denied things right here in the Bible. He said that that's not true. He's a liar and a pig. He says they all do it at the exact same time, which is exactly what John 5 does not say and directly contradicts.
The angel of the Lord, because Philo the Jew, writing in Greek to Greeks, using Platonic philosophy to show them the beauty and truth of the Old Testament, spoke of the Logos.
So again, Sam is endorsing Platonism as a means of interpreting the Old Testament. And of course, anyone who reads Philo and accepts everything he's saying based on Middle Platonism and the Old Testament, I think you're insane. Why don't you pick him up sometime and start reading and see how far you get before you start thinking to yourself, no, no, it doesn't mean that, right? He has all kinds of allegorical meanings and interpretations. He also does see a lot of the literal sense, and he'll distinguish the two at times, but he goes so far off the path because of Platonism, the very thing this person just endorsed.
Word being
the very thing that says God's unnameable, by the way. Okay, that's why they don't use the name and they use the names for Baal, Lord.
The second God, not created, but...
No, second God and created, just not in time. So he's wrong right there. He's at least admitting now, because I proved this after I went on with him and William. Excuse me. I did some videos where I also showed this, and I went on with Jake and showed this, that Philo does use second God, the second God, for the Logos. So Justin uses other God, or it means second to, heteros. It also means second of two. That's a literal meaning, okay? Second of two. And it also is, that's not the same as deuteros in terms of the exact equation, but they're often used as the same thing. And for Philo and Justin, they basically have to be the same thing. So it just showed William didn't know what he was talking about. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he doesn't believe he's the second God either. Certainly not like Philo, even though he just lied like he did.
Not uncreated, because he springs from God.
Everything springs from God. Everything's out of God, just like the Logos, just like Eve was out of Adam, just like the firstborn is the beginning of that one's generative power, defined 4 times unless it's figurative in the Bible, and still then applied only to temporal beings. Game over. Therefore, yes, just like wisdom says in Proverbs 8, there are things that happen, including create, because she was created as the beginning of his way. Right, Sam? The first of his works even. What about that? Yeah, so there's multiple ways that it says in Proverbs 8 she was created before and outside of the physical time. There are multiple texts in the Bible, including Job 1, 2, and 38, where the angels are there with God at specific times. Yom is used in 1 and 2 chapters of Job, and in 38, they're there when he creates all the physical universe, right? Even the foundation of the earth before the stars. So it's game over, pal, right? When there's still darkness. They haven't set the luminaries in the heavens yet. I've already talked about it. You haven't answered anything. It's game over. You're a liar. You don't understand anything. You just lied about Philo like you've been lying about Bart Ehrman. Enjoy Plato, even though you don't have any idea what he's talking about either.
High priest on God's throne.
High priest is not God, and being put on God's throne means you're not God. But when God puts you on his throne, it's because he's putting you there because you're representing him for his glory. Just like Isaiah 43:7 teaches. Just like Philippians 2:9-11 teaches. Just like the Bible teaches.
Who created man in his image, the chief of angels.
Right. Well, first he created the Logos because he had to come up with an archetype. That's the Logos and a plan. So just like Philo says, it's like a man walking, Sam. He literally says this. I know you know it because I've done a video about it, but you won't read it or talk about it because you're a liar. He literally says, Sam, you're a Greek Platonic Jew. All the beautiful things he writes. He literally teaches that God, the beyond all God, the Father, is kind of like someone walking around, and then he has an idea. An architect. He comes up with a plan. An archetype. Right there. And then he uses that to create everything else. The plan to create the building. So that's not even a fraction of the text that show the Logos is not eternal. Only eternal as one of these forms that God has not yet created as one of his plans or ideas yet. It's there as part of his mind, which isn't what the Bible teaches, because the mind of God and Jesus are not the same. They never were. No, Jesus isn't actually God's wisdom. You guys are stupid, okay? The Logos has its own mind. Right. So it has wisdom. It's its own wisdom. It's not a power. All powers are created in the Bible except God, the power. The Logos, though, has his own mind. It's a name in the Bible, actually. And he has his own mind. Right. Just like wisdom talking in the New Testament. That's Jesus with his own mind. As wisdom. Right. Because wisdom's eternal, like you said, and I agree. No Trinity. Now, what you don't understand is that's not real attributes, idiot. Okay, there is no Platonism in this way in the Bible. Those are just names given to real beings, sons of God. What is his name and the name of his son? Right. So, we already know that God has a son. His firstborn one. We already know what that means. We don't need all this other stuff. And even when we have it like in Philo, it doesn't mean what you mean. It's closer to what we mean, but still gone. Like you. Only not as far.
The angel of the Lord.
Yeah, something you'll never understand. Let me just do a quick check for the perv out because we know we're hammering Sam, right? It's getting completely blown out on all levels. Let's see what's happening. Let's see what has become. Yes, so Vinyl Apologist came in and literally took a cucumber and blew out his anus, right? I don't know why they do that. I think there's like, there's different types of homosexuals. Like Thaddeus's son is a normal homosexual. He just has that proclivity and he's not a liar. So he's just gay and that's life, right? We get along with people like that all the time. They don't lie. They don't pretend there's something they're not, like Sam. But then we get people like Vinyl Apologist and he's like, hey, right? Yeah, I'm a different kind of pervert. I'm a different kind of, I'm a bad homo. So I'm going to use this cucumber like the guy on the video with the lunch pail. Have you seen that video? Look it up. Man takes cucumber out of his lunch pail and yeah. So look that up and you'll understand who vinyl apologist is. And then Michael Coco, QZ1 LD, so a fake name like Sam, came here and asked why I won't debate Sam. Why are you running from him? Yeah, does anyone really? I'm going to leave him here, right? Hey, Michael Koch, QZ111D, you get to stay. That is so funny, right? Okay, you guys have fun with Michael Coco. We'll just call him Michael Cuckoo. And I'll come back. We're going to come back and check on him, so he might have to go. But for now, Michael Coco, that's a good one. That's funny. Why will you debate Sam? That's funny. So we're going to give you a little credit right there. Okay, back to Sam.
So see, he needs to stay in New Testament textual criticism. But here's the shot, guys. What page is this? Page 381. Watch here. Footnote. The Tetragrammaton, the four Hebrew consonants, Yod, He, Vav, He, or Yod, He, Waw, He, YHWH, Hebrew Bible, which serves as the personal name of God, was translated in Greek version by the term kurios, or kurios, Kyrios, which comes in English as Lord. And so when the text indicates that every tongue will confess, here you go, bye-bye, the janazah, that Jesus is Lord, it appears to mean that everyone will acknowledge that Jesus has the very name Yahweh himself. So what do you want? You admit he has the name Yahweh. You admit that John says he's always been God, and he always had the name Yahweh, even on earth, not at his exaltation, and he's Almighty God, equal to the Father. Why not just say you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about? Because John says he's always been Yahweh if he's always had that name.
Okay, and it doesn't say he's always had that name. It says exactly the opposite, right? So once again, you just heard him lie. You literally just heard him invent a teaching that Jesus has always had that name that isn't in the Bible. It literally teaches the very opposite, and he just lies about it. He doesn't believe it, okay? All these things, whether it's the Son watching the Father and then doing what he does likewise, he always lies about that too. I mean, he's a blatant liar. This is not a Christian in any sense of the word. He's a charlatan. He's a pig. And if you don't understand that yet and you keep listening to him, you're stupid. He literally says, right here, Sam, it appears to mean everyone will acknowledge that Jesus has the very name of Yahweh himself. Now, no one has been disputing that, even though it's not necessarily the case. Some people believe it's actually the name Lord, that he's being given. He's made Lord in Acts 2:36. Sam blows that too. But I don't really see a problem with it either way, because again, just like Isaiah 43:7 says, he calls those by his name whom he creates for his glory. That's exactly what we have happening in Philippians 2. So the problem is people like Sam are so stupid, they don't understand how to connect this stuff and make sense of it. So they run to the later pagans, creeds, councils, all the weeds, and they just listen to them, right? So he can't figure out nothing. He has to stay with that later pagan doctrine. Whereas we can just look at the Bible and see, oh, okay, Isaiah 43:7 says, he calls those by his name whom he creates for his glory. The next chapter and a half or so, part of Isaiah 45 is applied to Jesus in a totally different way to show that God of Isaiah 45, the Father, glory to God the Father, is maintained by one who's given his name and always elsewhere said to be created, right? Unbelievable stuff, right? It's incredible. All they do is lie about what the terms for create mean, right? Whether it's firstborn, being given life, all of it. Beginning of the creation by God, Son, They just lie. So it doesn't negate the fact that those terms mean you're created. They do. They don't even understand the whole time thing like we do and the Bible does. And so that's all wrong too. But the idea that those terms don't normally convey creation and they therefore can't be used as part of the qualification of the application of the text in Isaiah 43:7, namely, those given God's name are called and created by him for his glory, is ridiculous. Okay, you're assuming those don't mean created, and you're basing this on a view of time that's not consistent with the biblical text, or even with Philo, whom you're citing and misusing here along with Bart Ehrman. It's incredible.
It is important to note, however, that Jesus is still differentiated from God the Father, exactly why we're Trinitarians. So all this is to happen to the Father's glory.
Right, like we've been telling you, you've been lying about and avoiding. He notes it right here, and he doesn't say anything about the Trinity at all. That's you interpreting what he says as the Trinity. God the Father for him is a different being. He's literally been using being, the word with a B, all throughout what you've been reading. So he's never been speaking in a Trinitarian way like you do, or with person, the essence and all this stuff. He's been talking about different beings, one being given the name, the other one already eternally had for that eternal one's glory, right?
You remember that? You remember what he said about John's gospel? He said that unlike the Philippians poem, or for Paul, John says Jesus always had the name, and he had it on earth. Remember here.
Okay, and he's going to have to show us this because Sam is not to be trusted, especially in quoting Bart Ehrman.
Where is it, dude? Shoot. Oh, it's over here? Right here. Let me see. Here you go.
Okay, so according to Sam, Bart Ehrman says, John says, Jesus always had the divine name. So let's see if that's what he says. I think we talked about this also in part 2, but I don't recall this specific part, so let's review it again.
I am who I am. So in John 8:58, when Jesus says I am, he's claiming the divine name for himself. And that's
okay, that's not him. That's not Bart Ehrman saying John says Jesus always had that name. That's Bart Ehrman, if you're quoting him correctly, saying Jesus claimed the name, which Bart Ehrman already said Jesus was given. So when he was given it is another question. You said Bart Ehrman said John teaches Jesus said he always had God's name, or at least John said Jesus always had it. That's not what this says. That's it.
the name he always had.
This says in John 8:58, we'll listen to your lie in a minute. This says in John 8:58, he's claiming it. That's not always, Sam. Okay, now let's listen to your lie. Let's listen to him lie about this again. First, let's go back where he originally said he was going to show us. Listen.
He said that unlike the Philippians,
Listen carefully here because this relates to his misquotation.
Poem, or for Paul, John says Jesus always had the name, and he had it on earth.
John says Jesus always had that name. Okay, so let's see if that's what Bart Ehrman says John says.
Remember here. Here? Right here. Let me see. There you go.
Okay, and you'll notice, as he's going to read, Bart Ehrman does not say that. And this is right up there with his misquotation of Bart Ehrman on the date when Philippians was written, which he misquoted him as saying was in the early 40s. He said as early as the early 40s, right? Which could then mean from the early 40s all the way into the second century. So he like repeated that lie throughout the video. It was incredible. Then the last video, part 7, was probably even worse than this, but this is pretty close, right? Although the last part, you have to see that. I'll clip it, but he literally prefaced and followed a blatant misquotation with reinforcement front and back that he wasn't misquoting it while he was, right? I'm telling you, this stuff, how he's getting away with this is proof how stupid his followers are. Listen, so while he proves he is lying.
I am who I am. So in John 8:58,
That's not what that means also, or should be, that's a mistranslation. So see, especially in the Greek, see part 2 where we talk about that a lot, but listen to his misquotation here, because remember he lied and said, Bart Ehrman said, John said Jesus always had the name, said he always had the name. He doesn't say that. He says right here in bold, just like Sam reads and then misquotes. In John 8:58, he's claiming the name for himself. Let's see if it, but Sam said Jesus, Bart Ehrman said John said Jesus always had that name. No, he didn't, Sam. You are a liar.
when Jesus says I am, he's claiming the divine name for himself. And that's the name he always had, right?
Did you hear that part? That's the name he always had, right? No, that's the part you said, Sam, that Bart Ehrman said John said, but that he didn't say because John didn't say it. But that you said when you lied right here, right? This is incredible. Listen to him again. Listen to this guy.
He's claiming the divine name for himself. And that's the name he always had, right?
Right there. That's the name he always had, right? So he literally did not read that from Bart Ehrman, but again, added it himself and pretended like Bart Ehrman said that. This guy's despicable. I'm telling you, I feel so bad for people who are fooled by this guy, right? How reckless and stupid he is. Yes, he has experience because he's so insecure. He can't keep his fat face out of people's business because everyone has to believe like a pig face or he can't masturbate at night comfortably, right? It's disgusting and despicable.
All right. Right. In John, Jesus appears to take the name upon himself.
Okay, so right here, he literally contradicts you. In John, Jesus appears to take the name upon himself. Here he does not receive the name that is above every name at his exaltation. He already has the name while on earth. Not always, Sam. So you're a liar.
Here does not receive the name that is above every name. Now, what was the name given to him? In heaven, at Philippians 2:9, he said Yahweh, right? He already has the name while on earth. Okay, now note what he just said.
Right, while on earth. He didn't say always, so you're a liar.
Philippians 2:9 says he was given that name when he was exalted after resurrection. John.
Right, proving he's not God, because God doesn't have to be resurrected. He never dies. But Jesus died, his spirit went back to the God who gave it. So Sam, remember, Jesus, when he died, it's not just his physical death. He said, my spirit, Father, into your hands I entrust my spirit. That's not flesh. Psalm says, Ecclesiastes 12 says, you send forth your spirit, they're created. When they die, back to the dust their body goes, and their spirit returns to the God who gave it. Okay, so everything is explicitly stated exactly as we believe and teach. Not you, though. So he's resurrected after his spirit goes back to the God who gave it, and God gives him a new body. 1 Corinthians 15. He receives God's name, elevated to a position he didn't have before, to the Father's glory. Not to his glory, not to the Trinity's glory, to the Father's glory, the God of Isaiah 45.
It says he already had that name on earth. But what was
Right, on earth, not always like you lied about.
that name?
It doesn't matter. He says he took that name and had it on earth. We already know he gives that name to those he creates for his glory. He says explicitly, Father, you gave me your name, right? You're insane, dude. So he did not always have it. You're a liar, pig.
What was that name? So how can he say he's not Yahweh? I don't.
Because you're stupid. He's telling you right here that like others who are created for God's glory, he takes his name. He has it on earth, not always, okay? In other words, it's not really his name, Sam, like the Bible teaches over and over again. No, it's given to him, proving he's not Yahweh. That's where you can't figure things out. It's not Bart's problem. It's not my problem or the Bible's problem. Exactly. You are the problem.
Understand.
It's never going to happen, pal. You're too locked into this paganism, and there's no way someone insecure like you could handle being someone like me.
Now we have someone here. We got one more section to read. What's up, Tessia? What's going on? Unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so here's where Sam kind of starts going off the subject, right? He starts talking to this guy here about things related to Paul. Oh, he gets back to it here though. I don't want to miss some stuff. All right, so let's start here.
Okay. Let's read the final section here. And I think we'll wrap it up with showing you why Philippians 2, Jesus must be God in order for him to be given that status according to here, right? Pages 260.
Nope, we've already shown Isaiah 43:7 makes it very clear. God calls people by his name, whom he creates for his glory. You're stupid and you don't accept the Bible, so you keep lying about it. Creatures are given God's name. That's a biblical teaching. It happens all the time, in fact, and even in Philippians 2. So we can see very clearly it's not even for his glory. So the name given to Jesus is not for his glory. It's for the Father's glory, Sam. Therefore, it has to be someone other than the Father it has to be someone the Father given that name. So who had that name before the one who was given it? Right, the Father. That's Yahweh. Anyone else given it is not Yahweh. That's why the Father is one. God is one. Yahweh is one. That means no Trinity. One God the Father. That means the one God by identity is the Father. God is spirit. What's born from spirit is spirit. That's his nature. So all this is explicitly taught in the Bible. You don't accept it, and you just paganize what is in it. Now let's see. Let's let you kind of further show how stupid you are.
269 of his book. You ready?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, my bad there. So I was talking about the whole I am thing, and I am does not mean eternal. It's not a divine name. And as I said before, see my JWD editions where I have whole chapters on I am, the Old Testament and New, and I discuss exactly what it is, right? It's a subject and verbal predicate introducing uh, um, an express subject either by pronominal reference that is further identifiable by the context, and or not expressed like in Greek, ego eimi, but still understood like in John 9:9. So unfortunately, you guys have been wound up in so much insanity with this whole I am thing, and your translations have these giant capital I ams everywhere that are wrong. It's going to be a tough one. You guys, I would recommend reading my I am chapter in JWD 2 or 3. That should show you where everything is totally wrong, especially my third edition. Excuse me. I also talked about it in my first, but my third edition actually has a short history of how I am began to be used incorrectly by Trinitarians in the 4th century and was never used incorrectly before that in that way. It's really pretty bad stuff. But if you're not willing to question some of your fathers, right, people who were really screwed up, like Sam, right? This is the same kind of people. They're this stupid in many cases as well. I'm not kidding. Athanasius literally says, you don't say you beget what you create, when that's literally what we find all over the place in the Bible, right? Insanity. Try Psalm 92, right? That's just one example. Back to Sam. Oh, wait a minute. No, it doesn't mean that. It never means eternal. That's just a lie. So it either introduces an express predicate, or in John 8:58, it may have a double function because it's part of it's a present verb used with a past expression, unlike all the other I am sayings, except for in Proverbs 8, where wisdom also uses a very similar Greek grammatical construction to show again that she preexisted. So in John 8:58, that's what it means. It should be since before Abraham was born, I have been. I was is kind of correct, but not fully. I am is totally wrong. Okay, that is nonsensical. And it just shows how stupid those who were translating the Bible were, and or how much they cannot break free from tradition. Literally utilizing a 4th century invention to try to insert their doctrine in the Bible where it doesn't belong, right? It's insanity. So none of the I ams that are capitalized the way they are should be that way. They should all either have an expressed or pronominal predicate supplied, I am he, or the actual subject, I am Yahweh, I am first in line, whatever it is. Contextually, I am the blind man. And in John 8:58, it's part of a past expression that's a known idiom that gathers up the past to the present and should be translated in the English perfect. It's all very simple, and you guys simply will not learn. And so enjoy being stupid, like this guy.
Let's finish it. He will now show you where Paul identifies Jesus as the divine angel of Yahweh.
Okay, now we talked about this, right? I even did a whole special video because of how badly this guy blew it on 1 Corinthians 10:4. It's catastrophic, right? It's like literally it's career. These guys talk about careers ending, even though they're so blind and stupid and they keep licking his nuts, they'd never even think to apply what they say about us to him, which would have saved him a lot of pain and suffering. This guy makes some of the most horrific errors anyone since Athanasius has made, right? I'm telling you, not only the misquotations and just blatant blunders like we saw a minute ago with him lying about Bart Ehrman allegedly saying that for John, Jesus always had the name, right? Literally just lied, added it himself and lied again. It's disgusting. He blew this 1 Corinthians 10:4 thing so badly. Let's listen to him again. And now that we know what Deuteronomy 32 and 1 Corinthians 10:4 teaches, let's hear it again.
Okay? The incarnation of Christology that lies behind the Philippians hymn can be seen in other passages of Paul's letters as well. I've already said that Paul understood Christ to be the rock that provided life-giving water to the Israelites in the wilderness, 1 Corinthians 4, which means he must be Yahweh. And pointed out that Paul stated that Christ, unlike the first...
Right there, right? Now, he talked about it a lot more before, but he said it again right there, right? Totally blew the whole Petra connection with actual rock in Deuteronomy 32 that gives the water and food, right? Oil, food, that Paul says spiritualizes as Jesus in 1 Corinthians 10. He totally blows it, right? See prior parts in the clip coming up.
Adam came from heaven, 1 Corinthians 15:47. Now look at the passages that he's going to show you that Paul identifies Christ as God and having already existed before he was man. When Paul talks about God sending his son, he appears not to be speaking only metaphorically, like John the Baptist said to have been sent from God in John 1:6, for example. Instead, God actually sent Christ from the heavenly realm. As he put in the letter to the Romans, for what the law could not do, God did, sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh. It is interesting that Paul uses this term likeness, just as the Philippians poem did when it spoke of Christ coming in the appearance of human.
I think he just skipped that last part, didn't he? It is hard to say. Let's go back. Because he's so unreliable, right? Well, he's going into a trance right there, too. Listen, see if he reads that last part. It is hard to say. That should have been emphasized there, Sam. But we know you have a major quotation problem.
Sinful flesh. It is interesting that Paul uses this term likeness, just as the Philippians poem did.
Okay, he's at the top, so I'm going to remove myself. He's going to read down to that last part where it says in a human likeness, question mark. And let's see if he says it is hard to say, right? So that shows right there, again, uncertainty with Bart Ehrman. He's allegedly using Bart Ehrman to prove his view, right? And if anything, he's getting statements by Bart Ehrman that are just ambivalent, right? They're not committal. Well, listen, let's see if he says that.
When it spoke of Christ coming in the appearance of humans. It is the same Greek word in both places. Did Paul want to avoid saying that Christ actually became human? But that he came only in a human likeness? It is hard to say. No, that's not what he's saying. Nonetheless.
Okay, so he did read that. That's good. But then he adds his own comments there. He's crazy. And actually, well, see, well, let him develop it further, but he gets all this wrong.
But it is clear, follow me. Let's see if you guys are still following me. That Paul does not believe Christ has just appeared out of nowhere, the way angels seem to do in the Hebrew Bible. One of the verses in Paul that long puzzled me was Galatians 4:4, in which Paul writes, when the fullness of time came, God sent his son, born from a woman, born under the law. That means he's surely human.
Right. And that means that's when he was born, like came out of her. Not when he was, begotten in her, like 1 Corinthians 11 talks about with Paul, using Adam as the equivalent of God from 1 Corinthians 8, which he then refers to at the end of that very account in 1 Corinthians 11, to show that Adam is superior in terms of his glory over Eve, who is the one through whom the Dia, which would be Jesus, that is talking about him like with Eve coming out of Adam, and then Adam impregnating Eve and children being born in and through her, being actually begotten in and through her, but then being born out of her, right? We talked about this as well because he blows this as well, and he's going to get into a little bit more here, but I'll have a clip coming up because we did talk about 1 Corinthians 11 extensively previously and this text here, but I wanted to point that out.
I always wondered why Paul would indicate that Christ had been born from a woman. What?
All right, so this is Bart Ehrman talking. He's quoting Bart Ehrman, and Bart Ehrman's expressing he's pondering this question of why Jesus is born out of a woman, but angels just kind of come out of nowhere, right? They're not born from a woman or anything like that. They just appear. That's at least what it seemed like he was saying. So he's now pondering this whole Jesus being born out of a woman, and he says, I always wondered why Paul indicated Christ had been born from a woman. What other option is there exactly? Well, to be born from God, of course, first. And then if he's becoming a man by giving up the form of God that he was born in before a man, that's what the Bible teaches. But let's see how Sam reads it here.
Other option is there exactly? But the statement makes sense if Paul believed that Christ was a pre-existent angelic being. Do you catch it?
Boom, right? So you see, he misses these all the way, right? Remember, Sam is supposed to be using Bart Ehrman to show that he agrees with his view, basically, right? And yet, all throughout what Sam has been presenting from Bart Ehrman has been saying qualifying statements exactly like this, and even more so, right? A being who was God, with God. Things that Sam couldn't accept on their face. And like this right here, right? Listen to how Sam has to react to after reading something like this. He can barely hold himself together. Listen, I'm going to rewind that part. Listen to how he reacts right after he reads, was a pre-existent angelic being.
Believe that Christ was a pre-existent angelic being. Do you catch it? Do you understand?
Yeah, we're not retarded like you. So everything that's on the screen and that we can see and that you just read, even though you often misread it, is so simple and easy. The idea that you had to stop after angelic being and ask us if we understood it, right, just proves that you don't agree with it and you're trying to confuse people.
And extra crispy. Everyone else, what he just admitted to?
He literally just admitted that Jesus was, for Paul, a pre-existent angelic being. If you want to make sense of the statement that he was talking about before being born from a woman. So, yeah, we get it.
You follow me, guys? He's saying the only reason why Paul could say in Galatians 4:4, God sent forth his son born of a woman, born under the law, is to highlight the fact he's more than human and he already existed before he's born of the woman. Otherwise, it makes no sense to talk about being born of a woman, because that's the only way you can be human, to be born of a woman.
Right. Well, he's I believe emphasizing the whole God sent his son, right? So again, it goes back to Proverbs where it says, "What's the name of his son?" Or Proverbs 8 where wisdom is described as his son, right? Glad before him all the time, like a child. So he's clearly talking about him as an angelic being before he became a man. You do not agree with that. Okay? Angelic being. That's a separate spirit from God, even if you identify it as God in some way that Bart Ehrman isn't making clear. That could be like a middle Platonic type view, which is very prevalent, and that you also got wrong. But in any case, you're just out of your mind.
But now he says, now I understand why he said it. Because he's showing that
he's saying he understood it because he pre-existed before becoming a human being, like the Bible does teach. And so maybe you're kind of trying to get at the Muslims here, which is fine if that's what you're using him for, I guess, to show he doesn't agree with them in that way. Or he's actually just hypothesizing that it could be the case. But yes, okay, fine. This is definitely not your view, though. So on the one hand, you're using him to try to, show that the Muslims are wrong, but he's literally at the exact same moment and in the exact same words showing you're wrong, right?
Christ is more than a human, and he's already God's son before he's born of a woman, because he was sent forth as a son who was there with the Father to then be born of a woman.
Right, because like the Father's word says, you send forth your spirit that created, like you read previously in this series, in the same video of this series. The Holy Spirit came forth and begot Jesus and Mary. He was created in Mary after giving up the form of God, talked about in part 7. Totally emptied himself completely, emptied himself, so that's him and the Marfik. That's all of it. Everything, he had to be born. So consciously, he returned to the Father, just like after he died. And then the Father, with his Holy Spirit, begat the exact same person, so no difference in person, no difference in the spirit that is the person, that all of us have that returns to God, but that's not our nature that we're born in, right? So that's what he used to beget and marry a human being, that it was the same person that was a spirit before he became a human. So you're both stupid on that whole thing. And again, I don't think you fully understand what Bart Ehrman is saying. And you definitely don't understand the Bible and misapply it towards the Trinity, which is bad.
Now it makes sense. Because Paul was affirming Christ is the pre-human Son of God who had a pre-existence as the divine angel who then became born of a woman.
Right, because all angels are created. They're all sons of God who are with God in the beginning, like Job 38 says. Jesus is one of those sons of God, just like John 1:1 says. And that's who he's talking to in Genesis 1. But it's God who's talking, so he's not that one. That's his son, the one who was with him and through whom he made all things. Through and in whom, the equivalent of Eve in the analogy Paul gave that shows very clearly the glory of the two are different. Right? So stop lying, Sam.
See what he's saying, son of his right? Exactly, Travis. Right? In that case, it is important to point out that Jesus was born in a human way. He did not simply appear as angel Lord did to Hagar, Abraham, Moses.
That's what we've been saying. Sorry. My chips. Right. He actually had to be born. So what does Jesus literally teach everybody? And we reviewed this in prior parts and I reviewed it before. What does Jesus teach in John 3:6? He doesn't just say what's born from spirit is spirit. He says what's born from flesh is flesh. So there's only one nature per birth. You don't have two natures. That's not a possibility, by the way, in any type of empirical experiment that you could demonstrate, or anything in the Bible that you could use to show that's possible. It literally speaks against that very thing, not only in what we just referred to, but Jesus himself, when he appeared in the locked room after he raised his physical body from the tomb. Remember, he's made a life-giving spirit. But then, after preaching to the spirits in prison, all of Peter, he raised his physical body from the tomb before it sees corruption. Then he appears in that body to the disciples in a locked room and says, what? A spirit does not have flesh and bone. It doesn't have that. It's a different nature. So he's trying to tell him that's really his body right there. It's really him. Yeah, he's supernatural and he's using it and appearing in unusual ways, but he's manifesting the real thing. He's saying, look, this is real flesh right here. Spirits don't have this. You see these wounds, all this stuff? Yeah, no, it's really me. I'm not a spirit. I'm not a phantom floating around like they thought he was. So spirits don't have flesh. So when Jesus says in John 3, like I was saying a minute ago, what's born from flesh is flesh, that's what happened with Mary. He was born from flesh. He was begotten in Mary by the Spirit, created in her, just like all of us are. When you send forth your spirit, they are created. Then, when he's born from God, his spirit returns to the God who gave it when he died, Sam. That's the Father. Oh, okay. So he's called the firstborn from the dead when the Father resurrects him. Right. And Paul says when God resurrects those who are resurrected, he gives them a body, which is described as a life-giving spirit by Paul for Jesus, by the way. Right? In direct contrast in 1 Corinthians 15 with flesh. The Adam pre-sin sown in the flesh is literally the point of contrast between the Jesus who's given a new body and a life-giving spirit. He's called the firstborn from the dead when that happens. Well, he's not literally born from the dead, is he? He's born from the Father, the one from whose spirit he went back to. Excuse me. Okay, so Jesus says what's born from spirit is spirit. He's the firstborn from the dead and the firstborn of all creation. We'll set aside the firstborn of all creation part since you guys are too stupid on that to understand it. What about from the dead, pal? Right, because when you're dead, you're not alive. And he said his spirit went back to the God who gave it, just like all of our spirit does according to the Bible. Oh, and Paul says in 1 Corinthians that God gives it a body when the spirit returns naked. Yeah, and Jesus is a life-giving spirit. And what's born from spirit is spirit. What's born from flesh is flesh. Oh, okay, so firstborn from the dead, he's a spirit, just like we've been telling you and you've been lying about. Oh, and when he's born from Mary, flesh from flesh. He's not spirit. One nature per birth. Game over, no Trinity.
Here in the last days, he actually was born like as human flesh. Notice, he just told you Jesus appeared to Hagar, Abraham, Moses out of nowhere. But now that angel in the last days actually became a male child. Wow. Are you sure you're not a Trinitarian?
Right. Well, no, really, the question should be, are you sure you're not a C.W. Jah? Because he's literally talking like we are. He doesn't agree with you at all, and you're misunderstanding and misplaying everything. Right. Hebrews literally says, to which of the angels did he ever say this? Referring specifically to things that are said to him as a man. Because like Bart Ehrman has been telling you, and you're too stupid to understand because you don't believe it, even though the Bible teaches it, he was made lower than the angels. Right, he became the last Adam, perfect man, which born from flesh is flesh, not spirit. Right, spirit doesn't have flesh and bone as you see I have. Right, so flesh and bone isn't spirit also. Both of those are true, and that's literally what the Bible teaches in 1 Corinthians 15. And Jesus in John 3:6. Now, the fact is, Sam, you've blown all of this, okay? Every bit of it, and you don't understand hardly any of it, but you don't have any other skills or abilities or interests. So lying is pretty much all we can expect from you here forward.
Paul says even more exalt things about Christ. In chapter 2, we saw that some Jewish texts understood God's wisdom to be a hypostasis, meaning an actual person, personal agent of God, an aspect characterized God that took on its own form of existence. Wisdom was the agent through which God created all things, as in Proverbs 8. And since it was God's wisdom in particular, it was both God and a kind of image of God.
Okay, and again, this is where it's very clear to me that Bart Ehrman has some kind of, it's not very clear, but he's clearly using wisdom here, kind of like ortho-pagans do, and kind of not, right? I mean, in one sense, he seems to be referring, like Sam is quoting, to him as an actual separate existence. But he calls him a hypostasis of God, an aspect or characteristic, I'll remove myself, of God. That's Middle Platonic. And then he took on its own form of existence. Right? So prior to that, what? It didn't have that, right? That would have to mean it existed as God's actual attribute of wisdom in some way, which, as he says in kind of the middle, right after 8 on the far left, it says, and since it was God's wisdom in particular, it was both God and a kind of image of God. See, so everybody, you remember, as we've talked about, and see again parts 6 and 1 maybe or more, but they believe the Middle Platonists like Philo and others, especially the ortho-pagans today, okay? And this is different from the Catholics and Protestants in large part, although like Sam right here, they use it. So for the ortho-pagans and those who argue this way, including people like Athanasius and people that go all the way back to the 4th century or like them, so they like Philo. They don't believe God has a name, right? They adopt a lot of Middle Platonic thinking and understanding, not just from Philo, but from people like Origen and others. They start to think of God and Jesus as his wisdom and word as these things that are in God's mind, okay? These, like in Plato, and remember earlier Sam sanctioned Plato, which basically they have to, unless they're going to try to say no, and then like maybe some Protestants do, they'll just say no, the Bible teaches this in a way that's just not orthopagan, not so Platonic. Catholics kind of go there too, but it's all kind of based or comes from that in some sense, ultimately. Just not, they don't all fully develop in the same way from people like Philo and this whole middle Platonic thinking that they use to understand the Bible. When to understand the Bible, you just need the biblical records where these people talk about these things, including Jesus, where he says what the term God means for him, for others, like the other sons of God in comparison with God. John 1:1, right? Couldn't be more clear. The Word is with the God. Can't be that God. He's with that God. So he has to be a separate God, a second God, like Sam said. But again, for us and the Bible, it's not a second God like there's another God, No, like even Sam is saying here, but getting it all wrong because he's quoting Bart Ehrman and getting it wrong. See where it says image of God? Okay, so that's what we mean by a second God, or there's only one God, the Father, but there are other gods, his sons, who are both called and actually are gods because they're literally born as spirits from him. The B'nai Elohim that the Bible describes as being with God when he created the physical universe. So they're not other gods in the sense that they in any way identify as other than the one God. So yes, they're separate spirits, separate sons, but they're never being a separate God, okay? Jesus literally says that more than anyone. I'm not doing my will. I'm not speaking my own words. Okay, this is him, right? This is the Father. That's how they are. They're still individuals like us, but they know more than anyone, especially us. That's the best way to be and what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to represent the Father. And when they do it, they literally speak for and as him. Even though, like Jesus and the angels in Zechariah and elsewhere say, they're not their words. They're getting them from the Father. So they don't understand any of this, and they misunderstand what we mean by calling them a God or the only begotten God or referring to the angels as gods like the Bible does, right? They only can understand that in a polytheistic sense that's not what we're talking about and not what the Bible's talking about. So the Bible's literally talking about what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 8:6. One God the Father and many others who are called gods and who are gods, whether in heaven or on earth. That does not make them the one God or his equal. But if they're actual gods who serve him, that's who they're going to represent to everybody. They're never representing their own selves. That would be another God. Okay, that's not what we believe about Jesus. We don't believe Jesus is representing himself as another God. He is a separate God from the Father, and only begotten God, a spirit born from spirit. So he's separate. The whole creedal understanding is false. The whole understanding contributed by Constantine, homoousios, is false. That's dragon terminology. That's a pagan emperor, right? You guys are insane. Come on. Okay? That's not what the Bible teaches. Jesus, the imprint, the characterites hypostaseos, is right there, game over, right? That's the only thing that term can mean. I'm literally saying it's the stamp of his being. So, what is it you don't understand? Well, you believe later creedal things about being and Platonic understandings of being. So you're being pagan.
As the Wisdom of Solomon expressed it, wisdom is a pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. For she is a reflection of eternal light, a spotless.
Right there, right? He's quoting Bart Ehrman, who's quoting the Wisdom of Solomon, who's contradicting Sam, of course, destroying him, right? He's calling wisdom an emanation of the glory, right? Literally differentiating him from the glory of the Almighty right here, which is exactly what Hebrews 1 does by saying he's the outshining of the glory, right? And then also Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 differentiates Jesus' glory from God's glory in terms of the order of creation, right? And the means, the source versus dia, difference in glory right there. Everything is against this, what this guy says. He even says in John 17, he wants the glory back that he was given, showing he was created, given that glory, that he then wants to give to us. Game over, no Trinity, right? Partakers of the divine nature, Sam, how many divine natures are there? Just one. And our partaking of it doesn't make us one with God in that way, even though Jesus said we're all one in just the same way. Because he meant what, Sam? We're all separate spirits sharing the divine nature, just like we've been telling you.
Of the working of God, an image of his goodness. Quoting wisdom.
And by the way, there's no such thing as an image that's a second original. Doesn't exist, my friend, and is even conceptually retarded. So just like eternal generation, you got it all wrong, and you're just nullifying what you're saying and being stupid.
Solomon 7:25-26. Moreover,
which just disproved your doctrine.
we saw that wisdom could be seen as the angel of the Lord.
So qualified as seen and an angel, created right there. Game over, no Trinity.
Exactly, Bart.
You mean for me, because he's more agreeable to us than you, and you're lying and misrepresenting him again right here.
Jesus, for Paul, was the angel of the Lord. And so he too was God's wisdom.
Okay, so we're about at 2 hours now. He's still got like 50 minutes left. Okay, so we already know all this, right? All this creation stuff. I have whole videos on it. We literally talked about this in 1 Corinthians 11 extensively. So I'm going to kind of skip ahead. Let's see if we can get him to other stuff and move this along a little bit. Okay, so he's kind of getting to Romans 9:5 here. I kind of want to play that. I have a whole paper, related to it on the punctuation of Greek that I had up before, but I had to take down, but that's coming back. My Elihu online papers. So let's see what he says here in relation to Bart Ehrman about Romans 9:5.
Pauline Creed, meaning something Paul didn't write, but as the divine part is a confession, God the Father, Christ, that if all things means all, when
we already know about the whole all things. We've talked about it extensively. He misses it all, blows it all, and only means all when he wants it to mean all, which contradicts the very context of the all that he wants it to mean, like in Colossians 1:15, right? Firstborn.
Creation didn't exist.
Yeah, sure, because you don't understand all. And just like Eve's the mother of every living thing, she's the only one that existed before everything else, including God, because he's a living thing and she's her mother, their mother. All of them, everything, gone. Right?
Themselves exist through him.
It's the same with Eve. Paul literally makes that perfect analogy with Adam and Eve, showing Eve was taken out of Adam, just like Jesus was the firstborn out of God. Then, just like Adam created in and through Eve, humans that were then born out of her after the original ek out of Adam and in and through her, that is exactly what Paul parallels with all things coming out of God and in relation to 1 Corinthians 8:6 through Jesus. So you're wrong, we're right. We're also scientific in our understanding. You're not. So one side's stupid in all ways, the other one's not. Guess which one that is, Sam.
This sounds very much like what non-Christian Jewish texts occasionally say about God's wisdom. As God's wisdom was in self understood to be God, as we have seen. So too.
Okay, again, and I think also this is where we get Bart Ehrman displaying a quasi, if not actual, Middle Platonic understanding of God and his wisdom that is Jesus for him in a way that he seems to see as this attribute or characteristic, not real person up until a point, because he says he becomes a person. It seems like what he was indicating. But I'm seeing some language here that seems to be Middle Platonic or like it, which also shows that Sam has been filling this whole time to properly context him, right? Because wisdom is never identified as God, ever in the Bible. It's literally identified as God's first creation. I mean, it couldn't be more explicit. It's the most explicitly created thing in the Bible, other than maybe a human, where it's talked about being woven together in the womb. It's very similar in that respect. You even use that term, being woven together, right, in Proverbs 8. There's so much there that's temporal and created happening with wisdom because it's not his attribute. This is where these guys are stupid. From Bowman to this idiot, they simply don't understand what we're saying, or they never understood their own view, because we have never meant, not me, not any Jehovah's Witness ever has meant that wisdom in Proverbs 8 or as Jesus anywhere else means God's attribute. Never. Yet that's what they keep telling us. Oh, well, was God without wisdom? No. It literally is talking about him creating wisdom as his first creation. It's not real. It's his firstborn. Right. It literally says that wisdom has wisdom in that account, right? Earlier in Proverbs 8. Right. So the Bible sort of expects its readers to not be totally stupid and just start adding in a bunch of Platonism when it's not doing it. And it's just describing someone who was with God, who's literally called his son later in that very book of Proverbs, right? And described as a son being created in Proverbs 8, right? It all fits together. It only doesn't fit together with their paganism and or their Middle Platonism, which is also pagan.
Jesus and Paul. One of the most debated verses in the Pauline letters is Romans 9:5. Look what he says. Scholars dispute how the verses be translated. What is clear is that Paul is talking about the advantages given to the Israelites and indicates that the fathers, that is the Jewish patriarchs, belong to the Israelites, and from them is the Christ according to the flesh, meaning being flesh, being human, in regards to his human nature, he's descended from them. But there's another nature to him. The one who is God over all, blessed forever, amen. Here, Christ is God over all. This is a very exalted view. Wow.
Right. Well, he just noted that this is one of the most disputed texts in the New Testament, and you're literally citing him here as some kind of authority after you denigrate him in part 1. And he's giving you a view of a text that's highly disputed and that I have shown, and that I will show again when my Elihu online paper is uploaded, is not calling Jesus God, right? It's not only not doing that grammatically, but the punctuation of very important early witnesses to Romans 9:5 is against the view he's advocating for right here that calls Jesus God, right? So see my Elihu online paper coming out as soon as I can again, or if you had it from before on the punctuation of Romans 9:5, it's all right there, right? So at best, Romans 9:5 is disputed, but quite honestly, I think the grammar and the punctuation history shows it was understood not as a reference to Jesus as God.
Bart Ehrman admits.
He admits that it's a disputed text and then goes on to discuss it as if it's calling Jesus God in a way that many seem to think could be the case. You yourself denigrated his own view of theological information in part 1, and now you're trying to use it again, a la ego and me, in ways that don't fit the evidence. Does evidence matter, Sam? Or is it this constant appeal to authority that isn't an authority at one point and then it is another? It's insanity, my friend. You're not qualified.
That Romans 9:5, Paul affirms Christ as human and divine.
He doesn't really use those terms, but you are the one who's kind of just saying you're the one who's adding weight to what he's saying without actually dealing with the evidence that would suggest what he's saying is correct or not. So it's a catastrophe on all levels.
God in flesh?
No, what's born from flesh is flesh. What's born from spirit is spirit. So since Mary isn't spirit, and he was, just like you read earlier from Galatians, born out of a woman, right, she's flesh. So he's not God and flesh. He's just flesh. And then when he's first born from the dead, he's spirit again. Life-giving spirit. Right, a God like God, but he's not his own God, because he only does and says what the Father does and says. Even in Revelation, he's given a whole one by God, even while divine. It's over.
Perfect divine nature, human nature?
Nope, no such thing. He literally gave up the divine nature to take on a human nature because you can't have both. What's born from flesh is flesh, he said, and what's born from spirit is spirit. So that means one nature per birth. Sorry, game over. No Trinity. Oh, also, when he took his physical body to the tomb and showed it to the disciples, he said spirits don't have flesh and bone. Right. So totally different nature, my friend. They don't have it.
Whether you want to say now it's one composite nature after the union, distinct natures, you're both.
Well, which is it? Because you can't have either one. You can't, there is no such thing as a composite spirit flesh nature. That literally goes against all the texts I just cited for you and more. And everything Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, right? It's insanity, everybody. They don't believe the Bible, okay? They invent all this stuff, add new definitions to words, reinterpret words, add concepts like kenosis to the Bible. They add these two natures to one person, which isn't possible, right? Literally claim he knows all things and doesn't know all things at the same time. Blame it on his second nature. When natures don't know things, Sam, it's the person. Guess what? How many people is he? Oh, he's just one person? Human and divine, which isn't possible, but we'll go with it for your weak mind. Right. So he's one person, two natures according to you, or a blended nature according to you, neither one of which is true. He's still one person though, right? Guess what? He can't know and not know all things. That's only true if you're two people. Doesn't matter how many natures you have. Yeah, you're supposed to have one person per nature, just like Jesus teaches, John 3:6. Exactly. So that's what we believe. We don't separate it up like this. But the fact is, if you did separate it up, the natures don't know things, idiot. The person does. Or he doesn't. So you guys are liars, and we've defeated you. You guys have been destroyed.
Believing the same Christ, you don't believe the nature is mixed in.
No, we believe the Bible. There's one nature per person. It's that simple. There is no such thing, everybody, as two people in one nature, unless you're going to say a Siamese twin, right? Which is an anomaly, not how we're made in God's image. And you do not have two natures in one person, or even a blended nature. There's no such thing as a blended nature of spirit and flesh. Paul literally says that's not possible. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, and spirits don't have flesh and bone. So there goes your humanity. Paul literally says in Galatians 1, he didn't get his information from a man or a human. He got it from Jesus in the blinding light of Revelation. Exactly like Revelation to John shows, and he appears in the similar body to the spirits of old, who weren't physical, by the way, because you can't have two natures in one person. That's just a big lie. Big bad, Sam. Big bad, right? Really stupid stuff, by the way. Totally contradicts the Bible. It's later weed theology. It's what you find in these later fake Christian fathers who don't use God's name, who lie about his nature and create, through Platonism and other philosophies, this non-biblical God who doesn't have a name and who's capable of not knowing and knowing all things is one person, which isn't true. And one of the persons of the three-person God that isn't true is supposedly one person with two natures, which is also not true. It's all not true, everybody. That's why they follow the father of the lies. It all makes sense, everybody. There's a reason why they're gone and using this pig.
Or they create two persons.
That's what you guys do every time you say he doesn't know all things and knows all things at the same time, like you do when we talk about texts that say he doesn't know all things while he's alive as man and thereafter. So you're just liars all the time. You literally create two people because there's two separate bases of knowledge that can only be contained in a person, a consciousness. Knowledge isn't contained in a nature, fag. So, and that's not a Thaddeus son fag. That's you as a coward and a bitch who doesn't learn and keeps lying. So we got to spend all this time unwinding your insanity. Let's listen to this pig fat a little bit more, and let's just move forward. I can only take this idiot so much. This is all warmed over garbage, everybody. We've destroyed this so many times. This is limp dick shit from a fatso.
But he believes that? Yeah. He says that's what Paul said. Really? Yeah. Almost done. Right here. Almost done. But some translators prefer not to take the passage as indicating that Christ is God, but he takes it as God, that Christ is God.
Okay, none of this matters because he's both an authority and not an authority to you. There's no information in what you're presenting here from Bart Ehrman or from your own person that in any way would weigh in on this whole Romans 9:5 issue that I would have to deal with right here. I've already referenced my Elihu online paper that was online before and will be back online again. I've already referenced the fact that the textual history of Romans 9:5 has significant punctuation marks, incredible witnesses that show many copyists viewed this not as you do. You've never addressed it. You sure as hell don't address it here. And neither does Bart Ehrman. All right, let's just skip ahead a little so we can get out of this insanity, right? Can we stop? Guy's crazy, right? He's still on the angel stuff here. There's no text, new text that I see. Look at this guy. Let's see what he's saying here. Look at this guy. He's completely miserable, hates himself, and has mangina.
Sorry, the Trinity part. That's something that I find interesting.
It's not interesting. It's just a distraction away from the truth of the Bible, but whatever. Okay, so he keeps talking about, you can see him down there. He's talking to this guy.
Did Bart Ehrman destroy himself?
No, you destroyed what he actually said, and then you destroyed yourself. This is Sam's screen. And then you as part of it, you misrepresented Bart, lied about him, and at one point it sounded like you were masturbating, but I couldn't tell. Let's see what you're saying here.
Okay, so I'm in a dilemma right now where I've left the oneness group for, I think...
Okay, so he's talking to low-level oneness. He's got some ortho ed on here. It looks like he's trying to go to Numbers 24, which we've talked about before, right? Oh, 1 Corinthians 10 thing, guy's gone. Let's see what he's saying here.
49:52. But one of them, Caiaphas.
Okay, he's talking to this guy about the Muslims and stuff here. This is not related to what we were talking about there earlier. This is, right, we've already talked about Isaiah 45 and Philippians 2, right? See, I think it was the last show, part 7, where we literally got into this extensively, okay? So I'm not going to go back through that right here. This will come up again when we resume our series on the response to Sam and his cult followers and Jesus Christ Reigns summary of another video I did, which includes Philippians 2 stuff. So I'm gonna skip this unless he's gonna. We've already talked. Okay, so we talked about all of this stuff. I broke it down grammatically, and I listened to everything he says here. He just makes all the same bad mistakes and misunderstandings that we talked about in part 7. See part 7. I literally go through this key point by key point, grammar and semantics on pretty much everything. So, and again, it will come up again later. He's still in Philippians 2. This is all stuff we talked about extensively. We've talked about the name being given to him extensively. Okay, I'm gonna see if he talks about anything new here, and if he doesn't, I'm gonna wrap up the show with Jeremiah 33:16. Okay, you need to hear this so you can see very clearly where both they fail in their argumentation because of how stupid they are, and they actually provide an example of where the Bible shows the Messiah is a created being given God's name. But let's go back to Sam just to see if anything else relevant comes up. Okay, so he's in Philippians 2 still. He's at 348. He talked, this is all about the name. You start to see it says his name alone is set on high. Again, Sam, this is talking about Yahweh always owning the name. It's not talking about other people being given his name in the New Testament after they die faithful to him, and he resurrects them, creates them from the dead, gives them his name for his glory. That's not what Psalm 148:13 is talking about, Sam, okay? But unfortunately, he has a lot of deficiencies. not just down there. Right. Okay, so he's back to Philippians 2, misapplying Psalm 148:13 to Philippians 2:10, where in Psalm 148:13 that you just saw him cite, Yahweh has his name. Here, he's giving his name to someone who literally died faithful to him and was given life from the dead, and so called by his name for his glory, right? The two couldn't be any more different, Sam. Psalm 148:13 in this one, but good luck you figuring that out. He's back in Deuteronomy 32 here. We talked about this, right? He's in Philippians 2 there. We already know this is no God, no others. Okay, he's in Isaiah 45, right? Right here, this part at the end. That's the part Paul quotes from. We can all see right here real quickly. We talked about this before, but since he's got Isaiah 45, 22, and 23 on, this is Yahweh directly talking. Okay? He's literally talking about how he's God no other in the context of idols and anyone else. He's not referring to his sons, right? And he's not referring to those he calls by his name and creates for his glory, right? Anyway, this verse here, the end, that to me every knee will bow and every tongue will swear allegiance. As we know, that's quoted in Philippians 2. But it's applied to Jesus in a way that proves he's not Yahweh from Isaiah 45, right? 4 ways. He has to be resurrected from the dead and given life. He's created. He has to be given God's name. Doesn't have it. Not even at the time of Psalm 148:13 like he tried to prove, right? It's to literally taking a text from later times, like hundreds of years later, where Jesus is given the name and tries to equate it with Yahweh, who already has the name, when he's the one who gives the name to people he creates for his glory. It's game over, no Trinity. Right, so he applies this one part from the text in Isaiah 45 to Jesus in Philippians 2, specifies it's after he dies faithful to the God of Isaiah 45 that he's then given this name he didn't have, like the God of Isaiah 45, for the God of Isaiah 45's glory, right? Exactly like Isaiah 43:7 that we're going to get to in a moment says will be happened by those who are called by his name, and he creates game over, no Trinity. Sam! What a catastrophe, dude. Back to Philippians 2 again. The guy just cannot figure it out. And he's back to Psalm 148:13, miscomparing Yahweh in the Old Testament, hundreds of years before Philippians, Sam, right? Having his own name, and then Jesus later dying, being raised to life, and being given the name he didn't have for someone else's glory. That's a comparison for Sam, okay? And for Jesus, Lord Jesus Christ reigns right here, who uses a picture of Jesus as a human shield, right? Kind of like Sam with his daughters. Either way, they're both wrong, right? These guys are crazy. Lord Jesus Christ reigns. That's not the Father endorsing idolatry. Lord Jesus Christ reigns. What is Jesus? He's literally God the Father's image. That's not idolatry. That's an approved image. Hello? Hello? Right? No, only disapproved images, Lord Jesus Christ reigns, like the work of man's hands, silver, gold, the context of these statements. Try reading Isaiah. It will illuminate you. Maybe. Right? Who knows with you guys. All right, so we'll get back to these two in our other series. What is he doing here? We've already talked about all this, Sam. Yes, we know he's seated at his right hand in the heavenly places above all authority and dominion. Sam, we're seated with him. Did you know that? Right, so wherever he is, according to Revelation 3:21, we are too. He's sitting down at his Father's right hand on his Father's throne, on his own throne at the right hand. We are also. So nothing, every time he cites this, he's so stupid, right? He not only disproves his own doctrine by showing Jesus is raised to a position he didn't have before, so clearly couldn't be Yahweh, just like Psalm 148:13 said a minute ago. This is literally him being raised up to a position he didn't have before, and given all those things he didn't have before, things but put in subject to him that are already in subjection to Yahweh. And he doesn't understand that we're seated with him in this exact same position. He's so stupid, right? It literally says Yahweh is the only exception to those who are not subordinated to him. He misses that all the time, too. 1 Corinthians, Sam, read it sometime. It'll solve a lot of problems. Right here, right? Blows it all. Far above all rule, authority, and power. Sam, who's the exception to that according to Paul? The very same Paul that writes right here, all. Exactly, the Father. So all doesn't mean all when there's a clear exception. Try thinking that way with Colossians 1. It might help you, but it probably won't, because you already blow all the other alls after the alls of verses 15 and 17. Start with verse 15, Sam, and go all the way to 23, okay? And then see what you come up with. It should be a doozy. Anyway, let's see what else he has. This has all been destroyed. It all means totally different than what he says. He's done, right? He is finished. He is now a catastrophe. Let us hear the final words from his blubber.
And give us perfect recall of Scripture.
Okay, that never happened. So let's just, he's just saying prayers. Sam, that's a good one right there, Sam. You look very interesting. And we'll give you credit. We're going to say that's about as normal as we're probably going to find you there, Sam. Okay, now let's finish up, everybody. Are you ready? We're going to wrap it up with Jeremiah 33:16, a text that these perverts blow like all the time because they can't figure out the Bible. They literally collapse over the most simple things. Oh, you like the facial hair, huh? Trinity 1096. Ha ha ha. All right. I don't know what's happening. I think we might have someone going insane. But okay, Pastor Young, we'll let you just do what you got to do. If that makes you whatever. Quest for Christ, very nice. Good to see you. Okay, now Jeremiah 33:16. Are you guys ready? Let's do it. All right, so let's bring up the Bible Hub. I'll bring you guys up here. And we're going to show that creatures are called by God's name for his glory. It's not a threat to his glory, like when people give glory to idols or even demons, anyone but him or his approved image, his son, right? Who only does what he tells him to do and say. And it's literally expressed representation of his being, right? The stamp, right? The imprint. So it's literally the one thing we're told is okay. Like the serpent in the wilderness, they were told was okay to bow down to as a prefiguring of Christ, a la John 8. So Jesus is the image. An image is never a second original, by the way, proving creation right there. God's not an image, okay? He's never an image of someone else or something else. So we don't need to subject ourselves to this ongoing misunderstanding of these terms like image, imprint, son. They all mean what they mean. That's why they're told to us, so we can understand the relationship of beings we don't fully engage with or understand. What we're told is how we understand it, not like Trinitarians. They reinterpret it so that people misunderstand it and are deceived, right? We have to deal with it. We have to deal with all the craftiness of the pagans. They don't want people worshiping Yahweh. Let me just make sure here. Did we shut him down? Yeah, we stopped him. Okay. Jeremiah 33:16. Let's show how these guys blow it completely and actually provide evidence that in the Bible the Messiah is created. He's a creature given God's name for God's glory and created. So let us go ahead and read Jeremiah 33:16. Let's read it in the, we'll read it in two texts. Let's go to the parallel, actually. That's better. Parallel Bible, Jeremiah 33:16 first. Let's look at the English. So New International, right? In those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Okay. Those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live in safety. Oh, this is the name by which it will be called. The Lord, or Yahweh, right? You can see the capital letters for Lord, our righteous Savior. So you can see that in the NIV, it says in those days, Judah will be saved and Jerusalem will live in safety. And this is the name by which it will be called. Yahweh, our righteous Savior. We'll skip Sam's favorite Bible, the New Living Translation. English Standard. In those days, Judah will be saved. Jerusalem will dwell securely. And this is the name by which it will be called. Let's just skip that for. Let's try to find one that's a little different. King James. In those days, Judah be saved, and Jerusalem shall dwell safely. This is the name wherewith she shall be called, the Lord our righteousness. New King James, by which she will be called, right? So it's likely referring to Jerusalem. Judah, Jerusalem, by which it, New American Standard. So you can see here there are no translations, right, that make the kind of identification that you might think would lead to Trinity, right? So now let's look at the whole of the New King James here. Let's just read down for a moment. Okay, so verse 6, I will bring health and healing. I'll heal them, reveal abundance, peace. Verse 7, I will cause captives of Judah, captives of Israel to return, rebuild those places as at the first. I will cleanse them from all their iniquity by which they have sinned against me. I will pardon all their iniquities by which they have sinned, by which they have transgressed against me. Then it shall be to me a name of joy and an honor before all nations of the earth, who shall hear all the good that I do for them. They shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and all the prosperity that I provide for it. Verse 10, thus says Yaol, again, there shall be heard in this place of which you say it is desolate, without man and beast, in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man, without inhabitant, without beast. Verse 11, the voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of bridegroom, the voice of the bride, the voice of those who say, praise Yaol of hosts, for Yaol is good, for his mercy endures forever. No one is good but God, right there. And of those who will bring sacrifice of praise in the house of Yaol, for I will cause the captives of the land to return as at the first, says Yaol. Verse 12, thus says Yaol of hosts, in this place which is desolate, without man and without beast, and in all its cities there shall again be a dwelling place of shepherds, causing their own flocks to lie down. In the cities of the mountains, in the cities of the lowland, in the cities of the south, in the land of Benjamin, in the places all around Jerusalem. In the cities of Judah, the flock shall again pass under the hands of him who counts them, says the Lord. Behold, the days are coming, says Yaol, the Lord, that I will perform that good thing which I promised to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. In those days, verse 15, at that time I will cause to grow up to David a branch of righteousness. And I believe this is referring to the Messiah, like in similar to what we read in Isaiah 11, Isaiah 53, and elsewhere. Right? In those days, at that time, I, Yaol is talking, will cause to grow up to David a branch of righteousness. He shall execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell safely, and this is the name by which she will be called. Yaol, our righteousness. Okay? Now, Trinitarians try to say that's talking about the Messiah, that's Jesus being given this name, Yaol, righteousness. But as we've seen, right, throughout this translation and the whole parallel that we looked at, they all say it and she. Now let's go to the Hebrew text, Jeremiah 33:16. We're almost done, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I will be back tomorrow for part 3 review of the People of God article series I wrote in Medio, Sons of the Kingdom. We'll take a little break and we'll do a few other videos, and then we'll get back to Sam and the other series we have going once we kind of mix it up a little bit. Jeremiah 33:16. Days in those will be saved. Judah and Jerusalem will dwell in safety, and in this is what will be called unto her. Ya'ol. Tzidkenu. Righteousness. So, our righteousness. Even here, right, we're not getting the kind of identification that Trinitarians sometimes make, which is, again, even if you want to make that identification, literally here, we have the exact same term being used. You can see right here, it's in a different form, will be called. But if you just go over to the left and you click the number, right, it says it's yikra. But if you click the number, you can see it's from the verb kara. All right, to call, mention, proclaim, call. So, regardless of whether this is the Messiah or Judah, Jerusalem being called Ya'ol, our righteousness, it's literally using the exact same verb. What I'm saying is if Trinitarians ever try to make the application of this verse to Jesus, all you have to do is point out that it's exactly what we've been telling them. It's talking about those who are karad, called. I'm just using that verb in a colloquial way, like kanaod, right? So if we just note that, right, 7121, kara, regardless of who it's talking about, being called Ya'ol, our righteousness, Jerusalem, Judah, or the Messiah that is to come from David, the branch, it's being called, or he's being called by that name. That is exactly what we've been telling you guys, okay? About those who are created and called by God's name for his glory. Again, Sam has not answered this, and no one can because there's nothing to answer. It's God talking. We don't need to interpret it. He interprets his own right? Good luck to you interpreting what God tells you. Anyway, it's not hard to do when you actually just look at it in terms of the grammar and the context in which he's being presented. Everyone called by my name, called. Hanikra, 7121, kara. Why is that significant? Well, because right here, all, kol. That means everyone, okay? That means no exceptions. Like Sam tells us and lies about when he doesn't understand what is an exception. Here, there's really none. None is given, like, firstborn is an exception, right? Or Eve being taken out of Adam and Adam being made out of the dust. Those are exceptions to her being the mother of every living thing. Are they not? Right? That's how stupid they are. That's how dumb Sam is and how deceptive he is when he lies to everybody. Okay, so there are no exceptions like that in this context where someone who's called by God's name isn't created for his glory. We literally just saw in Jeremiah 33:16 that it's either one or two impersonal cities or the Messiah who's yet to be born through David that is called kara by Ya'ol, our righteousness. Here, the exact same verb is used for everyone. In the Greek, it's even more explicit. Everyone, all. It uses two terms. It uses the form of panta and hosoi. We'll take a look at it. Everyone called kara by my name. Ya'ol. That's my name. To no one else do I give my own glory. Yeah, I beget my son the way I took Eve out of Adam and through and in him I create all things. But just like with Eve and Adam, that glory's different and he's the outshining of my glory. So it's not my glory. I gave him his glory and no one gives me my glory. I gave him my name. No one gives me my name. But when I give people my name, it's for this reason right here. My glory. Okay, there's a reason that stupid fat Sam and the deceptive people who follow him lie to you about all the time. He literally says the very thing they say doesn't happen. That's how ridiculous they are. They literally quote at times Jeremiah 33:16, which literally proves, if you want to take it the way they mean for the Messiah, he's created. It says right here, all, that means everybody, who are called, that's kara, Jeremiah 33:16, by his name, that's Yahweh, Jeremiah 33:16, Yahweh righteousness, is for his glory. It literally says the Messiah comes in the name of his Father, and he does nothing for his own glory, but for his Father's glory. And his Father glorifies him as a result. And he creates him. He's formed him. He's made him. So this is a lie. This is a blatant lie. And it shows how stupid this crop of idiot apologists are who keep lying like God Logic and others because of Sam and their inability to actually research on their own. You got to be kidding me. God Logic said the other day with Trent Horn he couldn't even finish James White's Forgotten Trinity. Couldn't get past chapter 5 halfway through. So what? Everybody, he's a nice guy. He has no business being up here. Okay, the ortho queers, they're right in that respect. They're just wrong in terms of why. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's repeating what he learned from a pig-faced fatso and an ortho bro lame who's as kooky and weird as Sam and can't figure out what he wants to do next, right? I mean, it's a catastrophe on every level, everybody, that we even have to deal with these people at all. Look at how stupid they are. They can't even figure out what Isaiah teaches, okay? They literally collapse over Jeremiah 33:16 because Al-Bial, the fag machine, feeds them stupidity so that by the time they actually come into contact with someone who knows what they're talking about, their brains rotten to the core. They don't even know how to interpret the Bible anymore. If a pig-faced fatso or a dork who wears sunglasses and a hat in an artificially lit room doesn't tell them what to say, they're done. Okay, it's game over. They don't believe the Bible, they never did. All they want is to be accepted for believing the lies that pagans have taught them. Because that's exactly what happened. Do you see him teaching this? Everyone called by God's name is for his glory and he created them? No. You see him totally ignoring it, don't you? Have you ever seen him cite this verse? The only reason Sam cites it and doesn't deal with it is because I keep citing it and dealing with it and showing with you he can't. So he runs from it, keeps trying to figure out what to say, but can't. Right. So everyone, Sam, all. Let's look at the Greek, because how stupid you guys are. Isaiah 43:7. Yeah, pantas, hosoi. Everyone, all. Okay, like you can't be this stupid and miss it, like double emphasis, okay? Right? Called by my name. For in my or by my glory, I have prepared him. I have made him. I have formed him. He's called, formed, prepared, made, according to the Greek. For his glory, in his glory. It's not for the one who's given that name's glory, because if you're given that name, it's not your name. It's the one whose name the glory is for. So everybody, it is a 100% catastrophe for these people, not just in their failure to use Isaiah 43:7 to properly understand Jesus being given God's name for his glory in Philippians 2, but their failure, like Sam we saw earlier, to properly understand the partial quotation of Isaiah 45, together with the 4 disqualifying attributes of the subject in Philippians 2, namely Jesus, that show he's not the God of Isaiah 45. He's the Messiah, the one who was promised to come in God's name, not his own name, because if he came in his own name, then you'd accept him. But they don't accept him because he's not coming in his own name. He was given that name. God's not given his name. He has it eternally. Sam lied about that too and said that Bart Ehrman said that John said Jesus always had that name. When, in fact, John never said that, Bart Ehrman never said that, Sam said that and lied. He's been lying a lot about a lot of things in this whole series. He's been blatantly misquoting Bart Ehrman in ways that are beyond horrific, right? I have many clips coming up. He also failed to fully understand Bart Ehrman's theology, and he both cited him and discredited him as an authority. So no one really knows what to make of him at this point, especially if you rely on Sam, because you won't even know if it's Bart Ehrman whom he's quoting, since he often talks from his own person while reinforcing that it's Bart Ehrman's words both before and after misquoting him, right? Okay, so we know there's no reason ever to be listening to a guy who's this pathetic and deceptive. He literally turns on the very people he's helped learn his deceptions, okay? He's as bad as it could be, as pathetic as you can imagine. And he has no business talking about God, the Bible, me, Bart Ehrman, or anybody's mother. The only good Sam has left is something I cannot yet identify. I'm open to options though. So feel free to tell me what it is that he does that is in any way beneficial to anyone, because it's not when he talks about the Bible, and it's not when he quotes people that talk about the Bible, because all he does is lie about both. And if you don't think so, then you better get up here and explain your own self why he's misquoting both, why he can't figure out both, and why he can't even live up to the standard set by the Bible for Christian men that Bart Ehrman is able to do when he doesn't even believe as a Christian, and yet Sam claims to. Just how pathetic is that? Like the worst, right? And that's what we're left to deal with. All right, let me just say goodbye to everyone. I don't know what's that. We got people going insane here, a lot happening. I'm just going to let it keep going, right? Let me see. I don't know. It's hard to tell who's saying what in good ways at times because I'll check it out later, but I hope you guys had a good time. I hope this series, as crazy as it was at times and as difficult as it is all the time to listen to Sam and his lies and patheticness and screeching, right? He's not a good person. He attacks everybody and their mothers, and he disgraces Christianity. He disgraces and disobeys the Master, and he blasphemes the Father and the Holy Spirit. He attacks everybody and their mothers when he's the most pathetic person on the planet, and he should shut his mouth. Get a job, and if he ever achieves the level of maturity that Bart Ehrman does, maybe then he can offer some legitimate criticism. Until then, Sam, you don't hold a candle to him or me, and really nobody. So why don't you hold that candle next to yourself in the bathroom while you masturbate? And we'll get back to you another time, okay? Anyway, everybody, clips are coming. We'll make it focus for specific texts and issues so that you'll know what to use, when to use it. Be back tomorrow for a much better Christian-oriented discussion, even though this is necessary at times. We have to do it, as you know, if you believe like me. Put these pigs and blimps in their place. Stand up for the Father and the Master, and not let these lies propagate out of the mouths of these pigs. There's some good people who believe these things. Not everyone believes the same way. We accept that. But they've got a bunch of pigs and blimps over there that are lying about people and acting like insane people. And that's where we draw the line when it comes to how we deal with pigs and wolves like that. So we'll leave it at that. And we'll deal with Sam on these terms. And we'll deal with each other on other subjects in better ways tomorrow on our terms. Until then, may Jah bless you all on Jesus' terms in his name.